Taken and the others straightened their backs under Sato Furofushi's gaze, forcing stiff smiles. They were terrified that she might give them the same brutal treatment she gave their master. She actually forced Lord Shuren to self-destruct. Gulp. The very thought made their throats tighten in fear. What the hell had Lord Shuren just experienced? To actually choose self-destruction? Sato Furofushi only glanced at them briefly before losing interest. They simply didn't qualify to attract her attention. Meanwhile, now officially the administrator of Hell, Ai Inma received a resurrection request from a soul. Ai Inma. This resurrection mechanism is seriously flawed. With a stern expression, she rejected the application. But that soul's spiritual strength was exceptional. A rare powerhouse, even in Hell. After some thought, Ai Inma decided to bring the soul back manually. Moments later, Shuren opened his eyes, dazed like someone just waking up from a deep sleep. I'm alive again. Then, he noticed several people staring at him. Looking up in confusion, Shuren's mind raced. Had the resurrection location changed? After a moment of hesitation, he didn't question it further. But when he tried to move, his whole body froze. He couldn't move. Honana glanced at him, then asked, "So, how do we want to assign him?" Ai Inma replied calmly, "There aren't many strong individuals in the new hell. Send him to the human world to collect souls." Shuren blinked, completely lost. What are they talking about? Sending him to the human world? That made his heart skip. Quietly, he remained still and listened. Hearing Ai Inma's words, Honana hesitated and said, "This guy seems a bit untrustworthy." "It's fine." Ai Inma said flatly, "Hell's new systems may still be under development, but the chains are functional. As long as he's chained, he can't escape Hell's grasp." "Understood." Honana nodded, then looked down at Shuren with a teasing smile. "You heard that, didn't you?" Shuren was silent for a while, then asked cautiously, "You guys sound like the administrators of Hell." His eyes were full of confusion. He had lived in Hell for so many years but had never seen any of them before. "To be exact." Honana smirked. "Master Lin is the new manager Hell just hired, he was paid handsomely for it, too." Shuren's expression twisted in disbelief. Still, feeling the heavy restraints on his body, his gaze darkened. This had never happened before during a resurrection. Plus, looking around, he noticed many unfamiliar beings, some even looked like working dogs. Whatever. The important part was, they really were building a new Hell. So Lin really was the new manager? His expression was a mix of shock and frustration. He had worked loyally in Hell for years, yet they brought in an outsider for the top role? Unwilling to explain further, Ai Inma handed Shuren the new Hell rulebook and an employment manual. "Read this. If you agree, you can start." Shuren. He opened his mouth, ready to object, but ended up lowering his head to read instead. Part of him was curious about how these people planned to manage Hell. Then, his eyes widened in shock. They were actually planning to compete with the Soul Society? They wanted to extradite souls from the human world. If something went wrong, wouldn't that lead to a war with the Soul Reapers? Gulp. Shuren swallowed hard. He had thought his own escape plan was already daring enough. He was nothing compared to these lunatics. Especially when he remembered that man in the Soul Society. Yamamoto Genryu Saishijikuni. This group. Were they really not afraid? Clutching the manual tightly, Shuren's hands began to shake. He asked weakly, "What happens if I say no?" He had a bit of confidence facing Sato Furofushi, but Yamamoto? No way. Besides, he thought he was strong, but still got destroyed by Sato. Facing the top of the Soul Society's hierarchy? He didn't stand a chance. The pride he once had crumbled. He was quietly retreating from the edge. "Refuse." Honana's tone was flat and her expression unchanging. "Then I'll just keep you imprisoned in Hell. Given your crimes." Let me think." She tapped her chin. "Let's just make it permanent exile. No reincarnation." Shuren. Honestly, that didn't sound too different from before. He hadn't been able to leave Hell anyway. But reincarnation? That part was new. Flipping through the manual again, he paused at the section explaining reincarnation. Reincarnation. Shuren clutched the manual, eyes wide. "Is this real?" Honana nodded. "The 6 realms of reincarnation are part of Hell's fundamental framework." Shuren's breath grew heavy. So, if everything else failed, at least reincarnation was an option. He'd had enough of Hell. But reincarnation required wiping one's memories. Would he still be himself afterward? He hesitated for a moment, then gave up trying to figure it out. At the very least, there was finally a path out of Hell. That alone was enough to give him hope. He turned back to the manual and started reading thoroughly. He quickly realized how limited his understanding of hell had been. These people. They really had a methodical approach to managing hell. The 6 realms of reincarnation. A formal position system. Everything was structured and detailed. And once someone reached a certain position within hell, they could enter and exit freely? That was basically the same as escaping. Shuren looked up, eyes serious. I want to enter hell's system. He made the decision without hesitation. He'd test it out himself. If it didn't work, he'd just go back to destroying the gate of hell. Hearing his reply, Honana nodded with a satisfied smile. Soon after, Shuren and Sato Furofushi exchanged glances. A short while ago they were enemies. Now they were co-workers? Shuren had mixed feelings. He never imagined Sato, the supposedly upright and honorable one, was already part of this whole operation. And more shockingly, that overwhelming spiritual pressure from before actually belonged to hell's new master. Lynn didn't even glance at Shuren. He simply sat in the temporary office, lost in thought. This version of hell was made from spirit particles, just like the Soul Society. If they wanted major structural changes, they needed to bring in souls. So, the matter of extraditing souls from the human world needed to move forward immediately. But that was Ainma's job. Lin was perfectly content being the hands-off boss. He opened the screen to check on Kikyo's group. Judging from the image, something interesting might be happening. Meanwhile, first layer of hell. Swa-Fon and her squad were trudging forward, struggling with every step. The fiends along the path attacked like rabid beasts, swarming them non-stop. TCH. Swa-Fon frowned. How much farther till we reach the bottom? A petite girl with a bob haircut stood silently. Behind her, a group of soul reapers in black uniforms followed, led by Swa-Fon. Each wore a stern expression as they scanned the area. Damn it! They're everywhere. There was no mistaking it, they were completely surrounded by sinners. Captain, what should we do? Omida shrank behind Swa-Fon, her throat bobbing nervously, clearly terrified by the sight before her. Swa-Fon frowned. What a coward! How could her vice-captain be such a disgrace? Yah! Just as she was about to reprimand Omida, a sinner let out a piercing shriek and lunged at her. Swa-Fon, standing atop a white platform, narrowed her eyes. She swallowed her words and disappeared in a flash using Shunpo to dodge the sinner's attack. She reappeared a moment later, eyes sweeping the area. A massive crowd of criminals had appeared before her. Tisk! She clicked her tongue in frustration. Even the agile 2nd Division couldn't break through this blockade quickly, let alone investigate anything properly. Of course, if it were just her, Swa-Fon could use her exceptional Shunpo to easily escape. But her subordinates wouldn't be able to keep up. She couldn't abandon them and complete the mission alone. Taking a deep breath, Swa-Fon's gaze hardened. Through scouting, they had mapped out the hierarchy of hollows. Those without humanoid forms were nothing more than high-level demons. Enemies like that were easy prey for someone like Maiko. She used spirit devouring to condense an ajichas into a crystallized pill, then popped it into her mouth. Phew! Her golden eyes gleamed as she smiled. With all these hollows, I think I'll hit ultimate class soon. In the main world, it was rare to find such a high density of quality spirits. Coming to the world of the Soul Reapers was definitely the right move. Alright, let's keep moving. With a wave of her hand, Midoriko led the group deeper into Hueco Mundo. Their goal was simple: explore the entire realm. And, if possible, find Las Noches. But they'd been wandering for a while and hadn't seen a single person. Midoriko looked across the endless white sand, scanning carefully. Then, ow! A soft voice suddenly rang out. She froze, turning toward the sound. There, in the sand, something shifted beneath a cracked skull mask. Midoriko walked over with a strange expression and lifted it up. A small girl with lake green hair, golden green eyes, and a rose-pink horizontal tattoo across her face came into view. Her limbs flailed in the air as she tried to claw at the white sand. A faint hum came from her lips. Kikyo and the others approached. When they saw the little girl in Midoriko's arms, their eyes lit up. So cute! Maiko couldn't help but poke her cheek. Wait, this is Hueco Mundo. There are cute things like this here. The group fell silent for a moment. She's probably a humanoid hollow, right? But she didn't seem dangerous. In fact, she was kind of adorable. Midoriko spoke solemnly, I sense strong energy from her body. She's no ordinary hollow. Surrounded by noise, the little girl's eyes fluttered open. Hi! She blinked at the faces around her, tilting her head in confusion. Then suddenly, she panicked and began flailing. Don't take me back. Neliel. Deep within the depths of hell. The moment Lin saw Neliel on the virtual screen, he instantly recognized her. After all, there were only a handful in Hueco Mundo qualified to be called peerage-worthy talents. And Neliel was definitely one of them. Originally, Lynn had planned to visit Hueco Mundo someday to scout. But this was even better. She showed up on her own. However, Lynn narrowed his eyes. If he remembered correctly, Neliel should be residing somewhere near Las Noches, right? Her appearance here. Could it mean Las Noches is actually close to where Kikyo and the others are stationed? Meanwhile, in Hueco Mundo, Midoriko looked helplessly at Neliel, who was flailing about, and tried to reassure her gently. Don't worry. We're not here to capture you. This little one. Did she escape from somewhere? When she noticed the scar on Neliel's face, a trace of sympathy appeared in her eyes. Who in the world would hurt such a cute little girl? Even a child isn't spared? Of course. Midoriko's anger was mostly stirred because of Neliel's innocent, childlike appearance. Still, the hidden spiritual pressure emanating from her small body was far from ordinary. Midoriko stayed cautious. Hi. Upon hearing Midoriko's words, Neliel paused in her struggle, blinked curiously, and asked, Really? Midoriko nodded firmly. Really? Neliel's eyes sparkled. Yay! Big sis, you're a good person. She believed that way too easily. Midoriko looked conflicted. But Neliel paid no attention to her expression. Tugging at the sleeve of her Miko uniform, she tilted her head and asked with curiosity, Big sis, did you come from far away? Midoriko collected her thoughts and replied in a coaxing tone, Why do you say that? Neliel tapped her lips with a finger and answered matter-of-factly, because Neliel's never seen Big sis before. Midoriko. Neliel's expression suddenly turned serious. Big sis, don't go any farther. There are bad people ahead. Really, really bad people. She frowned as she spoke. Bad people. Midoriko and the others exchanged glances, then asked, What kind of bad people? Neliel made a face, then spread her arms wide and described, It has 2 big horns, and it's really tall. Listening to her description, realization flashed through their minds. A human-shaped hollow. That had to be their current target. I understand, Midoriko said, crouching down and placing Neliel on the white sands, gently patting her head. Though it was a bit hard to the touch. After all, her head was more bone than flesh. This little one. She was probably a human-type hollow too. Was this the Aaronkar that Lynn mentioned? Midoriko fell into thought. Elsewhere, not far from Las Noches in a well-hidden area. Dondakaka Birstan and Peshagwadak exchanged glances before shouting in unison, Where is Lady Nell? Realizing something, they quickly panicked. Quick, we need to get Lady Nell back. If Neutra Gilga finds her, we're doomed. At the same time, unaware that someone was desperately searching for her, Neliel proudly marched forward with Midoriko and the others. With every little step, her tiny feet left footprints in the white sands. She tilted her head and asked, Big sis Midoriko, will you protect Nelly? Midoriko patted her head, smiling. Of course. If anyone bad tries to take you, I'll beat them all up. Neliel nodded enthusiastically, pumping her tiny fists. Beat up the bad guys. Midoriko smiled warmly at the sight. After a brief discussion, the group decided to press on. Neliel eagerly volunteered to lead the way. Even though she warned them about bad guys ahead, there was clear excitement in her eyes the moment they decided to keep going. That palace. She'd wanted to sneak in and explore for a long time now. Of course. Midoriko and the others weren't just charging ahead recklessly. They still planned to hunt a few Ajichas along the way to level up. So, their pace wasn't particularly fast. And with Neliel guiding them, it became quite easy to find an Ajichas. Well, it was basically leading them into a trap. Meanwhile, deep in the 3rd level of Hell. After defeating the last Hell Guardian, Swa-Fon finally allowed herself a moment of relief. Clap clap clap. Suddenly, a crisp sound of clapping echoed. Swa-Fon's muscles tensed instantly. Who's there? A lazy voice responded. You've made impressive progress over the years. That voice. Swa-Fon's eyes widened. Her pupils contracted, and her body began trembling. She slowly turned her stiff body around in disbelief. And saw a tall, mature woman with dark brown skin, a high ponytail, and orange tights standing behind her. Shihaorin. You're Yuaki. The moment she saw her clearly, Swa-Fon clenched her fists tightly, her voice shaking with anger and pain. In an instant, her expression twisted in fury. Why are you here? Yuaki remained calm, shrugging. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? Then her expression grew serious. Swa-Fon, why are you in hell? If they were in the real world or even Soul Society, Yuaki might have just ignored her spiritual pressure. But this was different. This was hell. More specifically, Hell now under Lin's control. She feared that SWAFON might recklessly provoke Lynn. If that happened, there might not even be a chance to regret it later. After all, she had watched SWAFON grow up. How could she not care? But hearing Yoryuki's words left SWAFON stunned for a moment. She instinctively replied, the miasma from hell started leaking into the Soul Society. The Captain Commander sent me. Wait. She suddenly caught herself, gritted her teeth, and snapped, why should I explain to you? Ah. But she had already done it. Yoryuki chuckled teasingly. You're still so cute, SWAFON. So cute I can't handle it. Huh? Cute? SWAFON felt dizzy. Yoryuki's words had completely thrown her off, making her lips twitch involuntarily. Did Yoryuki just call her cute? SWAFON stood there blankly, cheeks slightly flushed. Her mind short-circuited. It took her a full minute to process what just happened. No. No, no, no. She shook her head violently. Why am I happy over Shihaorin Yoryuki's praise? She was going crazy. How shameful. How pathetic. The woman in front of her was a traitor. SWAFON forcibly calmed her surging emotions, stared at Yoryuki with a blank expression, raised her hand, and pointed her golden finger ring at her. I don't care why you're in hell. But since we've met here, then. She paused, eyes narrowing. Today is the day you die. Dash. Silence fell over hell. But Yoryuki didn't even react to SWAFON's declaration. She was busy processing something SWAFON had let slip. The miasma of hell. It had actually reached the Soul Society. Yoryuki recalled the moment when Lin's spiritual pressure exploded. That pressure had penetrated hell itself and affected the Soul Society. Thinking about it, Yoryuki clicked her tongue. Lin's power was still beyond anything she could have imagined. Dash. Meanwhile, seeing Yoryuki lost in thought, SWAFON clenched her teeth. You. Are you looking down on me? Ah. Yoryuki snapped out of her thoughts, scratched her head, and gave a bright smile. Sorry. I wasn't paying attention just now. What did you say? Say that again. SWAFON's face twisted in anger. You're not even worth repeating it to. With those words, she vanished. Feeling the sudden gust of air behind her, Yoryuki's lips curled slightly. SWAFON. Have you forgotten my title after 100 years? As soon as she finished speaking, her figure vanished as well. Only an after-image remained, pierced by SWAFON's golden glove. When the illusion disappeared, SWAFON's cold expression twisted. She turned toward where Yoryuki had reappeared. Flash Master, Yoryuki. So you haven't forgotten. Yoryuki shrugged. TCH. SWAFON sneered. 100 years is more than enough for me to surpass you. She tore off her sleeve, revealing her black uniform. The captain's attire. Yoryuki's gaze lingered on her clothes. She looked a little nostalgic. I will take your other title too. SWAFON declared. Boom. A terrifying burst of spiritual pressure exploded from behind her. But in the next moment, that immense power was compressed into a single point. SHRRRK. The sound of space being shredded echoed, and the area behind her twisted unnaturally. SWAFON grinned, turning back to Yoryuki. This is the result of 100 years of training. Let me show you what it's become. She stepped forward. The white stone beneath her exploded. Her speed surged to the limit. In an instant, she was in front of Yoryuki. Her expression was calm. She raised her hand and swung, the corners of her mouth already curling with victory. But Yoryuki calmly extended her hand before the attack landed. Buzz. An energy wave identical to SWAFON's spiritual pressure radiated from Yoryuki's palm. Crash. Their forces collided. SWAFON's tightly condensed energy was neutralized on contact. Yoryuki said indifferently, this level of power is too early for you. SWAFON's eyes widened in disbelief. And her golden eyes gleamed coldly as spiritual pressure erupted behind her. This technique is called Shunko. SWAFON stared, stunned. Her lips trembled. You've already mastered that technique. Yoryuki brushed her hair back lazily. About 100 years ago. 100 years ago. From her casual tone and refined movements, it was obvious she wasn't lying. And there was no need to lie about something like this. Damn it. Why? Even after 100 years, why was Yoryuki still stronger? Why? Why could she only follow behind her? Frustration twisted her expression. I'll never accept this. SWAFON roared and lunged again with her golden gloves. But Yoryuki gently swayed to the side, dodging every strike with ease. SWAFON's speed, which she once took pride in, looked like child's play compared to Yoryuki's movement. Bang! Suddenly, Yoryuki reached out, grabbed her wrist, and said softly. Are you done venting? SWAFON tried to pull her hand back. No movement. She could still launch other attacks, but she didn't. She simply glared at Yoryuki. You think I'm just venting? I'm sorry for leaving without saying goodbye, Yoryuki said seriously. SWAFON's eyes widened. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze. Stop struggling. A long silence followed. Eventually, she lowered her head and muttered, what's the point of saying that now? Sorry. Yoryuki pulled her into a hug. SWAFON hadn't expected this at all. Her eyes widened, and her face turned red. Why you? Wasn't she afraid SWAFON might take this chance to hurt her? She really trusted her that much? SWAFON felt something warm in her chest. Maybe. This healed the gap left by the century she lost. What 100 years? Yoryuki was just out collecting folk songs. Feeling the warmth of Yoryuki's body, SWAFON convinced herself. She even gave her an excuse. Seeing this, Yoryuki's lips curled slightly. SWAFON, you're still so easy to comfort. Good. The plan worked. After a while, Yoryuki gently asked, SWAFON, do you want to come with me? Go with Yoryuki? Was she really inviting her? Ha! SWAFON's breathing grew heavier. Why didn't she take her away 100 years ago? SWAFON had asked herself that question for a century. Since the day Yoryuki left, it had haunted her. But now, it no longer mattered. This time, Yoryuki was the one reaching out to her. SWAFON raised her eyes, dazedly staring at Yoryuki's face. Her lips parted slightly. The words I do lingered at the tip of her tongue. But, Captain. A loud, honest voice echoed in the distance. Omida? That voice jolted SWAFON back to her senses. She quickly broke free from Yoryuki's embrace, her expression turning serious. She straightened up and declared, I am the current captain of the 2nd Division. There's absolutely no way I can leave with you. However, as she said this, a hint of loss welled up inside her. But her subordinates were nearby. She couldn't afford to show weakness. SWAFON sheathed her zanpakuto, lifted her chin, crossed her arms, and said coldly, I'll act like I never saw you. I won't bring you back to the Siridae, but the next time we meet, I won't hold back. With a soft scoff, she turned and walked away. Yoryuki didn't stop her. Instead, she offered one last piece of advice. You'd best not explore any deeper into hell. SWAFON paused briefly, then left in silence. Yoryuki exhaled softly. SWAFON. You've grown. She could tell SWAFON still wanted to leave with her. But she refused. Because of her responsibilities. Yoryuki's gaze followed her until she saw the 2nd Division members gathering around their captain. She chuckled. She's more responsible than I ever was. Back then, Yoryuki had abandoned everything. She'd left without a word, even forsaking her own squad. No wonder SWAFON still held a grudge. This was fine. For now, she gave up on recruiting SWAFON. But we'll meet again, she whispered. Lynn had shared some of Hell's upcoming plans with her. Like Soul Society, Hell would soon begin the extradition of souls from the human world. That would shatter the balance between the 3 realms. There was no way the Court of Pure Souls would accept it. Which meant, Hell and Soul Society would inevitably clash. That was the part giving her a headache. She was born and raised in Soul Society. Even if she had left, it wasn't like she didn't care. If not for knowing about Aizen's plans, she would never have defected. But now, she had no choice. She stood on the other side. Still, there had to be a way. A balance had to be found. No need for unnecessary conflict. Yoryuki's eyes sharpened with determination. She gave SWAFON one last look and turned to leave. Far off in the distance. Omida scratched his head. Captain, did something good happen? SWAFON glanced back. What are you talking about? Well, you're smiling. Smiling? SWAFON blinked and instinctively glanced in the direction Yoryuki had gone. But Yoryuki was already gone. SWAFON quickly pursed her lips and said flatly, you're seeing things. Hi. But I just. Bam. Ow. Omida yelped as SWAFON smacked him hard on the head. Expressionless, she repeated, I said, you're seeing things. Omida winced and muttered, but she was definitely smiling. SWAFON let out a nasal sound. Omida froze. Alright. I didn't see anything. You weren't smiling. SWAFON. She rubbed her forehead. Idiot. Then, she cast a glance at her squad, who had been watching the entire thing unfold. Startled, they tensed up immediately. Satisfied, SWAFON snorted, let's return to Soul Society. Hi. The 2nd Division members were surprised. We're not going deeper. SWAFON hesitated briefly, recalling Yuki's warning. No need. I already have a rough understanding. Someone was definitely behind this chaos. Since that was the case, there was no need to probe further. But that man who left with Yuki, isn't he still in hell? SWAFON's gaze turned icy at the thought. Her hand clenched around her zanpakuto. Thankfully, she restrained herself. After taking a few deep breaths, she temporarily let go of her plan to kill Urahara Kisuke. Before long, SWAFON's team left. Silence returned. Except the fifth level of hell was in ruins and undergoing restoration. Time passed slowly. A few days later, Hueco Mundo. Kikyo and the group found a high vantage point, overlooking a distant cluster of buildings. After days of wandering, they had confirmed that Hueco Mundo was largely barren. But that massive structure ahead. It was bizarre no matter how you looked at it. Midoriko, the bad guy is in there. Neliel puffed her cheeks and pointed toward Las Noches, visibly angry. Midoriko reached out and rubbed her face. Then she glanced at the building. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That must be the Las Noches mentioned in their intel, right? They had been heading toward it for days. Still, even with that goal, it had taken time. Mainly because they had been focusing on leveling up along the way. And also because Hueco Mundo was absurdly large. Of course. If they moved at full speed, it wouldn't have taken that long. Kikyo asked, how does it look? Midoriko paused and then answered, I can sense several strong spiritual signatures. Most likely, ultimate class beings. Kikyo sighed. Then with our current strength, we'd be no match for them. Yet. Midoriko nodded. She was the only ultimate class among them. Let's level up first, she decided. Watching their decision unfold from the screen, Lynn touched his chin. After some thought, Lynn contacted Kateria via the group chat. She was wasting her strength just sitting around. Might as well use her as a beast of burden. And while at it, Lynn asked her to bring Ingvild along. That girl had slept for 100 years. Zero combat experience. Immense power, but clueless on how to use it. That wouldn't do. Ultimate class devils were going to be the main force for interdimensional invasion in the future. They needed real combat experience. At the same time, Ainma sent a message. The passage between hell and the human world had stabilized. And the first city was Karakura town. Immense power, but clueless on how to use it. That wouldn't do. Ultimate class devils were going to be the main force for interdimensional invasion in the future. They needed real combat experience. At the same time, Ainma sent a message. The passage between hell and the human world had stabilized. And the first city was Karakura town. The area he was assigned to was a small block within Karakura town. But Karakura town. Shuren's tone was mixed as he held the manual, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, he could leave this cursed, dark hell. Even though it was only a temporary exit, not a complete escape. Still, as long as he was carrying out his mission, he could remain in the human world freely. Of course, there were monthly quotas. Someone from above would check to ensure the number of souls extradited from each region met the target. However, given that Hell's current activity would likely clash with the Soul Reapers, meeting the early quotas would be easy. And there was pay. Shuren had been shocked by that. He thought he'd be working for Hell for free. Yet they were offering proper compensation? Surprisingly humane. This salary system was actually proposed by Yukinashita Harano. If everyone was a member of Lin's peerage, there'd be no need for salaries. But clearly, Lin couldn't deploy his own peerage to handle every world alone. Even with 3 million cursed children in his ranks, only a small percentage had combat strength. So, they had no choice but to recruit capable local talents who couldn't become peerage members. Like Shuren. As the saying goes, if you want a horse to run, you have to feed it grass. Thus, the salary system was born. This payment structure was one of Yukinashita Harano's experimental policies. As Lin's power expanded and more worlds came under his influence, she could foresee his peerage becoming massive. And a massive peerage meant bloated management. There was only one Lin, and he couldn't personally oversee everything. Not to mention, it was getting harder for her to even spend time alone with him, let alone others. So, Harano resolved to prevent this problem from worsening. A healthy organization needed clear rules and structure. However, implementation wouldn't be easy. Thus, she chose the new Hell as her test site. In Hell. Dressed in a professional suit and gold-rimmed glasses, Harano sat in Lin's office, reporting her proposal seriously. After hearing her explanation, Lin thought briefly before nodding. All right. Do as you proposed. He realized she was right. With the growing number of peerage members, there were bound to be areas he couldn't manage directly. Take the 3 million cursed children, for example. If each one needed personal attention to grow. Just imagining it gave Lynn a headache, even as a transcendent. So. He quickly approved her plan. Ahem. Harino cleared her throat, then smoothly sat on Lynn's lap. Her soft figure pressed close. Leaning into his arms, she exhaled against his collarbone, her breath warm. Master, the administrative matters are finished. Shall we discuss more, personal business? Her breathing quickened slightly, a hint of allure flashing behind her glasses. The contrast made her even more captivating. But. Lynn lifted her chin and chuckled. Just now. Weren't you the one talking about rules? Harino froze. Her original intent had been to create a system allowing average peerage members, who rarely saw Lynn, a chance to earn his favor. But. She hadn't expected to be the first one caught in her own web. Her lips pursed in frustration. Seeing this. Lynn's hand slid down and grasped her softness as he whispered in her ear. But rules only apply to others. Harino blinked in surprise. That's right. No matter how strict the rules were. In the end, Lynn's will was absolute. Rules and systems were merely a way for ordinary peerage members to gain favor. Those favored by Lynn directly were exceptions. Harino's eyes sparkled. She looked up at Lynn, blinking like a cat in anticipation. Seeing this, Lynn smiled and said, "You've worked hard building the peerage. You deserve a reward." With that, he stood up and lifted Yukinashi to Harino with ease. "This outfit suits you. Rib." The sound of tearing fabric echoed. Yet Harino didn't feel her clothes being torn. All she felt was the warmth from Lynn's embrace. Breathing heavily, she whispered, "Master, down there. It's cold. Don't worry. That'll be fixed soon." MMH. Soon after. The door to Lynn's office was shut tight. The air inside rapidly heated up. Outside. Inma arrived to deliver her regular hell planning report. She reached out to open the door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Master. Isn't here. She tilted her head in confusion. Nearby, Honana didn't move. If he truly wasn't here, there'd be no barrier in place. Honana's eyes flickered slightly as she recalled Harino entering earlier. Wearing such an elegant outfit. Clearly had impure motives. She glanced at the innocent Inma beside her and sighed. If this continues, our Hell division is going to be marginalized. Inma tilted her head. Why do you say that? Hell was clearly progressing well, wasn't it? Had she failed in something? Inma fell into deep thought. Honana watched silently. Was she really just a born workaholic? It seemed. There was no hope relying on Inma. But. This new Hell project was a rare opportunity. Meanwhile. Shuren, who had caught up with the new system updates, was still studying his assignment documents. The salary system was based on contributions. And. Those contributions could be exchanged for Hell's resources. Realizing this, Shuren's eyes lit up. He scanned the list and found quite a few impressive rewards. Things like Hell-level rank promotions, unknown skill techniques. Even. The exchange catalog had tiers. He could only see rewards available at his current level. Still, that alone was surprising enough. Slowly, the resentment hidden deep in his heart began to fade. After all, he had gone from being a boss to working under others. No matter how thick-skinned he was, it was uncomfortable. But now, with pay and benefits, it wasn't so bad. He had reasons to convince himself. Shuren shook his head and continued reading. Self-recruitment allowed? His eyes suddenly gleamed. With such a good system, how could he forget his old subordinates? He hadn't been back in a while. Taken and the others were probably worried. Later. 5th layer of Hell. Shuren returned to his original base. Only to find a desolate atmosphere. Everyone was gone? He was stunned. After a while, he hunted down Taken and the others, dragging them back one by one. Face dark. Taken, face full of fat, tried his best to smile. Haha. Boss Shuren, you're alive. They hadn't heard from him in days and thought he'd died. Shuren didn't reply. He simply stared at them. Everyone shrank back, heads lowered like quail. Satisfied, Shuren crossed his arms. This time, I've come to take you all to the real world. Everyone looked up. The real world. Boss, you found a way to leave Hell. Shuren nodded, pulling out a black contract. Sign this. They glanced at each other in confusion. Murakumo was the first to read the large print on the front. Hell Personnel Employment Agreement. Boss, did you become a Hell lackey? Bang. Taken went flying. Shuren said coldly, will you sign or not? Silence. A moment later. Hell had a few new recruits. Shuren watched his team grow with satisfaction. He'd earn credit for all their achievements. After all, recruiting members also counted toward contribution. Looking at the now non-zero number on his nameplate, he nodded. These days were looking brighter. He quickly updated Taken and the others about Hell's changes and their new superior. Without wasting time, Shuren headed straight for the gate to the human world. Target, Karakara town. Taken and the others were full of anticipation. Even if they were shocked at first. They were finally escaping Hell. No more worrying about being captured and imprisoned for eternity. This was way more realistic than trying to destroy Hell's gate. Finally, as the dog-headed demons stepped through the passage, Shuren and the others followed with determined excitement. The world of the Soul Reapers. The human world. Urahara Shoten, 4th basement level. A black gate surrounded by purple miasma stood quietly in the corner. From time to time, strange beings with dog heads, exposed tails, or thick body hair stepped out from the gate. Urahara Kisuk's eyelids twitched. He sighed helplessly. What was this place supposed to be now? A hell outpost in the human world? Still, he could only complain inwardly. What was going on in Hell had already been explained to him in detail by Shihara and Yoryuki. Thinking of that, Urahara pressed down the brim of his hat, his eyes flickering slightly. Lynn's strength was far beyond his expectations. At first, he was merely curious about what Lynn was doing in that godforsaken place. Hell was a place even soul reapers avoided. A prison for the most heinous of sinners. Yet, he had studied Soul Society's history and understood that place well. Hell. A realm even Soul Society had no jurisdiction over. Even Captain Yamamoto, the strongest Soul Reaper in 1,000 years, held no sway there. And yet, Lynn had somehow taken control of it. He even wanted to develop it into a place resembling Soul Society. To be honest, ever since Yoryuki told him about this, he'd been in a constant state of shock. A sense of unease lingered deep in his heart. Sigh. Urahara sighed again, then looked at Tessai beside him and muttered, "Tessai, tell me. Why do the strongest always want to stir things up?" Whether it was Lynn or Aizen Sosuke, they were both headaches. At least with Aizen, he still had some confidence in stopping him. But Lynn? He honestly wasn't sure. After all, Lynn hadn't shown any abilities during that encounter, and yet, he had subdued Yoryuki so effortlessly that even Urahara's Bankai couldn't break through her barrier. And now, Yoryuki was Lynn's. Urahara rubbed his brow, visibly distressed. Still, he'd try to find a balance between Lynn and the world. Even if Yoryuki had said that herself, it didn't stop him from worrying. Beside him, Tessai paused, his stern face briefly hesitating before he spoke. Maybe. They just want to see the scenery above. Urahara was stunned. He recalled what he had learned from Yoryuki. A man who now controlled multiple worlds. Even the Soul King, who was said to have created the 3 realms, didn't reach this level. After all, the Soul King only had influence over this world. Let alone controlling other realms. Even traversing between them might be beyond his capabilities. Thinking that far, Urahara shook his head and gave up. Whatever becomes of this world, it wasn't his problem anymore. At the end of the day, he was just a small shop owner. Saving the world. That was never his role. Once he accepted that, Urahara felt a strange sense of ease. His eyes flickered as he whispered to himself, "I wonder. Will I get a chance to visit another world?" Urahara fell into deep thought. To be precise, he was probably working for Lynn now, wasn't he? Meanwhile, Shuren stepped into the human world and took a deep breath. The scent of freedom. Excitement bloomed on Shuren's face as he eagerly looked forward to exploring the human world. Taken and the others were equally thrilled. However, Shuren quickly settled down. He lifted the chains wrapped around his body, and a crisp metallic jingle followed. From these chains, Shuren could sense an extremely deep connection with Hell. A connection even stronger than when he had been inside it. Shuren understood clearly. The moment he harbored any disloyal thoughts, he would suffer a terrible fate. He raised his head to look at the dog demons that weren't wearing chains. His gaze sharpened. He clenched his fists tightly. One day, he would break free of these shackles. So, get to work. Shuren raised his hand and pointed toward the souls wandering through the human world. Urahara adjusted the brim of his hat, casting a sidelong glance at Shuren. That guy seemed quite capable. Not to mention, he had visible fluctuations of spiritual pressure on him. Clearly, a local of Hell? Urahara pondered for a moment. Hell's origins were ancient. Since the rise of Soul Reapers, powerful ones who committed grave sins were often sealed there upon death. Naturally, there were plenty of powerful beings in Hell. But When Urahara saw how devotedly Shuren worked for Lynn, he couldn't help but make a strange expression. Completely tamed. Well, not his concern. But Urahara was still a bit curious. How exactly did Hell handle soul extraditions? A little while later, Shuren led his team and began collecting souls. After Taken and the others escorted several souls over, he shook the wooden nameplate on his body. Buzz! A shadowy river filled with desolation emerged. The Sansa River. That's right. AI Inma had fully replicated the mechanisms of the human world's hell within her domain. This was Shuren's first time using the nameplate to summon the Sansa River, and the novelty was undeniable. Once the souls were placed on the boat by Taken and the others, it moved without wind, silently drifting toward the depths of hell. Not long after, the wooden nameplate on Shuren's chest flashed. A new contribution value appeared. Seeing that, Shuren clenched his fists, his fighting spirit rising. Keep going. Yes. Taken and the others also received their contribution point updates, and their excitement showed. A bright future was ahead. Later, Murakumo asked, Master Shuren, what should we do about the hollows? Hollows. Hollows are souls too. Send them to hell, of course. Shuren didn't even hesitate. What do you mean hollows? They were basically walking contribution points. Yes. Murakumo immediately shoved a hollow's head into the Sansa River that led back to hell. Of course, he was still sensible enough not to place it on the same boat as the other souls. Otherwise, it might turn into an all-you-can-eat buffet for the hollow. While Shuren and his crew were busy extraditing souls. A few days later, a soul reaper dispatched to the human world to perform a soul burial arrived, only to stare blankly at the empty streets. Wait a minute. Where were all the souls in Karakura town? Were they all devoured? And why were there no hollows around anymore? Soul Society. Ding ding ding. A few days later, the bell summoning the captains rang once more. 8th Division Barracks. Kurako Shunsui scratched his head lazily and muttered, aren't these captain meetings coming a bit too frequently these days? The world of the Soul Reapers. Soul Society, Siraidii. Central Headquarters Building. The captains of the 13 divisions had once again gathered. Yamamoto Genri Usai Shijikuni sat at the head seat, eyes closed and expressionless. It wasn't until all the captains had taken their seats that he slowly opened his eyes, sweeping the room with his clouded gaze before calmly saying, Yukatake. Ahem. Yukatake Jushiro coughed twice and, with a weak voice, said, the reason we've gathered everyone today is due to certain abnormalities in the human world. In the present world. Upon hearing this, the captains raised their eyebrows. Kurako Shunsui rested his chin on his hand and lazily commented, is it the Quincy again? None of the other captains said anything, but their silence clearly conveyed the same thought. Yet, if something unusual happened in the human world, it was easier just to blame the Quincy. Such was Siraidi's long-standing prejudice against them. However, Yukatake shook his head. We're not sure yet, he replied. Then his expression grew serious. In the past, the Quincy would only destroy hollows. While that did disrupt the balance among the three realms, it was still manageable. But this time, he paused briefly before continuing, our squad members stationed in the human world reported that while a large number of hollows have appeared, only a few remain. Of course, for now this issue seems to be isolated to Kuah town, but we can't guarantee it won't spread to other areas. After finishing his statement in one breath, Yukatake panted lightly as he waited for the others' responses. Maintaining the balance of the three realms had always been of utmost importance to Soul Society. This was why Yukatake had immediately reported the matter to the captain commander. As expected, Yamamoto took the matter seriously. All captains had been summoned for this reason. After hearing Yukatake's report, the relaxed expressions on the captains' faces quickly turned grim. Seeing this, Yamamoto tapped the table and said in a deep voice, the specific cause is still unclear, but this kind of issue, which could endanger the three realms, must be eliminated at the source. Aizen Sosuke remained silent. But behind his glasses, a subtle flicker passed through his eyes. Karakura town. So something unusual really did happen there. His eyes shifted slightly, glancing toward Jin Ichimaru across the table. How could such a shift occur in Kuah town without anyone noticing? Ichimaru, sharp as ever, immediately caught the message behind Aizen's gaze, and his fox-like eyes narrowed slightly. Had he grown too complacent recently? Aizen wasn't particularly concerned with how thoroughly Jin had been monitoring the situation. But as the focal point of his long-term experiments, Kuah town was supposed to remain stable. If possible, it would be best if nothing unexpected occurred. Still, if something had happened, that could be fun in its own way, couldn't it? Aizen showed a hint of interest and said, in that case, how about assigning this investigation to the 5th Division? Yamamoto glanced at Aizen and replied, the situation is still unclear. There's no need for the 5th division to enter the human world. He rejected Aizen's proposal without hesitation, then turned to look at Kiraku Shunsui. Seeing this, Shunsui let out a long sigh. Last time, the old man wanted to send him to hell, and now here we go again. Seriously? Why was it so hard to slack off? But he had turned down the old man's request last time. If he did it again, Shunsui feared he wouldn't be leaving the headquarters anytime soon. The old man would definitely find an excuse to test his swordsmanship. Thinking this through, Kiraku shivered slightly and quickly straightened up. Let the 8th division handle this. Squad 8 will get to the bottom of what's happening in Kua town. Seeing this, Yamamoto nodded in satisfaction. Very well. The 13th division is more familiar with the present world. Yucatec will support you. With those words, the arrangements for the mission were finalized. Aizen still wore his signature gentle smile. He showed no sign of dissatisfaction with Yamamoto's rejection. Besides, if they couldn't investigate openly, who said they couldn't do so in secret? Before long, the meeting adjourned. The 8th division began making preparations right away. Ise Nanao adjusted her glasses, looking determined and motivated. A stark contrast to the ever-lazy Kiraku Shunsui. Then, this mission is yours, Nanao-chan. Nanao gave him a sidelong glance. There wasn't another captain in all of Siridi as openly hands-off as Kiraku. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door across the hall. Kokiki Rukia, leading the 13th division members, reporting. Kiraku paused for a second and then said, looks like 13th squad is here. Though. Kokiki? At the same time, Aizen returned to the 5th division barracks. After a short wait, Jin's figure quietly appeared. Aizen didn't even turn his head. His gaze didn't move, but his lips parted. Let's go see what's happening in Kua town. Hearing this, Jin shrugged and vanished again. Silence returned to Aizen's room. His expression remained calm, though his voice carried a hint of anticipation. Hopefully, there's something interesting to be found. Otherwise, wouldn't everything going smoothly be too boring? The present world. Karakura town. Rukia Kokiki, Ise Nanao and their team passed through the gate. As it was her first time in Kua town, Ise Nanao immediately frowned. This spiritual pressure is unusually dense. She looked surprised and asked, how can such a place exist in the human world? In contrast, Rukia, who had been to Kua town multiple times, was not surprised. She surveyed the surroundings with a calm gaze. Then she frowned. That's what makes it so strange. The spiritual energy here was this dense, and yet, she couldn't sense any hollow spiritual pressure. Even more. She said seriously, can you detect any plus souls? Nanao took a deep breath and released her spiritual pressure to scan the area. After a full minute, she shook her head. Her face grew serious. I can't sense any. With that, Rukia and Nanao exchanged glances. Something was definitely wrong with Kua town. Suddenly, a plus soul's aura appeared in their detection range. Their eyes lit up at once. A newly born plus. In other words, someone in Karakura town had just died. But they barely had time to feel hopeful before the aura vanished entirely. Both Rukia and Nanao froze in place, then quickly recovered and rushed toward the location where the aura had just disappeared. Shuren opened the Sansa River and personally sent a new soul into hell. Then he looked at the contribution points displayed on his wooden nameplate, which had just increased again, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. If this kept up, maybe a promotion and raise were just around the corner. Suddenly, Shuren raised an eyebrow and turned to look ahead. A spiritual pressure was moving rapidly in his direction. He narrowed his eyes slightly and muttered, after so many days, I finally ran into one. A Shinigami? Or a Quincy? With this doubt in mind, Shuren stood quietly in place. He didn't have to wait long. A figure in a black kimono soon came into view. When Shuren saw the attire, a flash of understanding passed through his eyes. Oh, a Shinigami. But just some nobodies. Not seeing a captain's Haori, Shuren curled his lip in disinterest. Murakumo, I'll leave this to you. He waved his hand lazily. On the other side, when Kokiki Rukia and Ise Nanao spotted Shuren and the others in the distance, their expressions grew serious. Ise Nanao said solemnly, it's confirmed. The entire aura has disappeared in this area. It seems. This must be related to them. Rukia paused, then said, Vice Captain Ise, let's try negotiating first. Ise Nanao nodded. It's our best option for now. Her gaze passed over Taken and the others and landed on Shuren. This man. He gave her a very dangerous feeling. Someone at captain level? Ise Nanao frowned slightly, realizing the situation was more complicated than expected. She quietly pulled out a hell butterfly and sent it flying towards Soul Society. Before long, Rukia and Nanao arrived before Taken and the others. ISE Nanao looked around and asked bluntly, the souls and hollows that have disappeared in Karakara town recently, are you responsible? Adjusting her glasses, her tone left no room for doubt, despite phrasing it as a question. After all, this group looked suspicious no matter how you viewed them. Mind telling us what you've been doing? Murakumo and the others exchanged glances, then replied flatly, just doing our jobs. Isn't that something the Shinigami wouldn't be bothered by? As expected. A glint flashed behind ISE Nanao's glasses. The fact they could identify her as a Shinigami meant these people weren't ignorant. But your job? ISE Nanao frowned. You mean destroying both souls and hollows? What exactly are you purifying? Taken shot back, the same thing you Shinigami do. ISE Nanao was momentarily puzzled. What did the Shinigami do? Rukia furrowed her brows. Was this really the job of a Shinigami? In reality, she was stunned. Soul burial. Congratulations, you got it right. Unfortunately, there's no reward. Shuren crossed his arms, calm and composed. As for hell, there had been no orders to conceal anything. So, Shuren's actions were fully above board. Now that he had an official position, he felt more confident. After all, he was now a regular soldier of hell, with hell backing him. He didn't need to fear Soul Society alone. Hearing Shuren's confirmation, Rukia and Nanao exchanged surprised glances. It really was soul burial? But no. If they were doing the job of the Shinigami, what was left for the Shinigami to do? Also, where were the souls and hollows being buried? Rukia was about to argue, but ISE Nanao stopped her. Rukia. ISE Nanao shook her head. They were here to investigate, not engage in battle. Besides, as a vice-captain, she wasn't confident in facing a captain-level opponent. ISE Nanao committed the faces of Shuren and the others to memory, then pulled Rukia back with her. Shuren. He watched the retreating figures of the Shinigami and fell into silence. Seriously? They're leaving already? Weren't they supposed to clash with the Shinigami? He had even braced for a life-and-death battle. But that's it? Shuren narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking about the bespectacled woman's repeated glances at him, then muttered, she's sharp. After realizing the gap in power and understanding the situation, they chose to withdraw. A very smart move. Beside him, Murakumo hesitated and asked, Master Shuren, should we pursue them? Shuren paused for a moment, then frowned and said, report it to Hell first. Right now, it was unclear how Hell viewed the Shinigami, so better to file a report first. On the other side, as Rukia was pulled away by ISE Nanao, she looked puzzled. Vice Captain ISE. ISE Nanao explained, that tall man is very strong. I'm not sure I could handle him. Rukia's eyes widened. He's stronger than you, Vice Captain. ISE Nanao nodded with a serious expression. He should be someone at captain level. Hearing this, Rukia's pupils shrank sharply. Captain level. Only now did Rukia realize the gravity of the situation. In the shadows, Kokaki Byakuya stood quietly. This world. It's becoming dangerous. He was debating whether to pull Rukia from the mission. Although only Shuren and his group had appeared so far, the presence of someone at captain level implied far deeper forces behind them. And compared to Rukia and Nanao's investigation pace, Byakuya had already used Shunpo to scan the entire Karakara town. All he could say was, a lot of unexpected individuals had shown up. And most notably, he couldn't sense any spiritual pressure from them. But his intuition told him they were very powerful. Also, they really were doing the job of soul burial. Just like the Shinigami. But their destination wasn't Soul Society. This would undoubtedly disrupt the balance between the three realms. After confirming Rukia had safely left, Byakuya looked into the distance and locked his gaze onto a humanoid figure with a dog-like face. If he wanted information, the easiest way would be to capture one of them and interrogate him. But that would only alert the enemy. Besides, it wasn't his jurisdiction. As a noble, Byakuya couldn't easily interfere with another squad's mission. As for why he came to this world? Well, he just wanted to relax a little. Running into Rukia was just a coincidence. Yes, that was it. Meanwhile, Soul Society. Kurako Shunsui raised his finger, and a pitch-black butterfly floated down. The next second, ISE Nanao's serious voice came through. Captain, after a preliminary investigation, it seems a captain-level figure is involved. Hearing this, Kurako Shunsui, who had been lounging lazily, paused, deep in thought. Captain level. Looks like this is more troublesome than I expected. Thinking that, he scratched his messy hair helplessly. Now, he had to go himself. Since his adorable Nanao-chan said so, if he didn't go, he might end up collecting her body. Still, if I had known, I would have taken that hell mission last time. Kurako Shunsui felt a tinge of regret. Swa-Fon had returned from hell in just one night and seemed in a great mood. The mission must have been a breeze. He missed out. But Kurako Shunsui stood up from the wooden floor, gripping his zanpakuto, adjusted the brim of his hat, and said playfully, "Time to fulfill my duties as captain." Hueco Mundo. Lynn rested his chin on his hand, glancing over the intel AI Inma had sent. They've met the Shinigami. Lynn wasn't surprised. In fact, the Shinigami's reaction was a bit slow. It had been days, and they only now noticed something was off in this world. After glancing over the report, Lynn dismissed it. Have Yoryuki keep an eye on them. She's familiar with Shinigami matters. When Yoryuki received the assignment, a question mark flickered across her face. But it was just what she wanted. At the same time, Hueco Mundo. Woo woo Lady Neliel. Peshagwadak was crying tears of joy. I finally found you. Neliel blinked awkwardly. She'd been having so much fun, she completely forgot about them. Pesha sobbed for a while, then glared at Midoriko and the others. You dare hold Lady Neliel hostage? Roar. He let out a roar, gathering a black zero in his mouth. Damn it! I must rescue Lady Neliel from these humans. Wait. Neliel's eyes widened, and she quickly waved her hands to stop him. But bang! Before Pesha could release the zero, he was sent flying by Midoriko. With a thud, he slammed into the ground. The black flash dispersed before it could be released. Pesha! What just happened? Midoriko looked speechlessly at the strange creature that suddenly jumped out, then asked Neliel, "Is this guy your friend?" Neliel nodded instinctively. Midoriko understood and gave up the idea of killing him. But he's an Arrancar too. Why is there such a huge difference? Neliel's so cute. Tisk. Weaklings like this should be sent to hell to do hard labor. But Midoriko looked up at the sky and asked, "Is that guy your friend too?" Neliel. She turned her gaze from the flattened Pesha to the sky. Suddenly, a man with short, dark yellow hair and a black eye patch appeared in her view. He stared directly at Neliel, the corners of his mouth curling into a wide grin. Found you. Neliel tilted her head and looked up at the sky, her round eyes widening. She subconsciously clutched Midoriko's pant leg and said in a trembling voice, "Midoriko, that's the bad guy." Hearing this, Midoriko raised her brows, a glint of realization flashing in her eyes. No wonder. This guy gave her such an unpleasant feeling. On the white sand, Peshagwadak slowly pulled his face out of the ground, his mind still spinning. Clearly, the slap from Midoriko had rattled him. But he shook his head forcefully to snap out of it, then looked up. A yellow-haired figure entered his vision. That figure. It was one of Neutra's subordinates, the one who had been searching for Lady Neliel. Pesha's pupils shrank sharply. Tesra Lindo Cruz. He stiffened, staring warily at Tesra. How did you get here? Tesra glanced at him with his single eye and sneered. How did I come? Obviously. You brought me here. Pesha's eyes widened. Impossible. If Tesra had followed him here, why hadn't he sensed any spiritual pressure? But now wasn't the time to dwell on that. If Tesra reported to Neutra that Lady Neliel was here. Just thinking about that bloodthirsty lunatic made Pesha tremble. He couldn't let Lady Neliel fall into Neutra's hands. Resolving himself, Pesha shouted, "Lady Neliel, I'll hold him off. Go meet up with Dondi Chukka." With that, he charged straight at Tesra without hesitation. Bang! Tesra calmly caught Pesha's punch. His gaze remained indifferent, completely unfazed as he kept his eye locked on Neliel. To think the former number 3 would end up like this. No wonder Master Neutra couldn't find her. A sharp light flashed in his eye. Perfect. This is my chance to earn some merit. Damn it! Pesha growled. Even if I die, I won't let you take Lady Neliel. Without retreating, Pesha charged again. Tesra looked down on him with disdain. You couldn't beat me before. Now that you've left Las Noches, the gap has only grown wider. Buzz. A purple zero gathered at Tesra's chest, larger and brighter than Pesha's. In the blink of an eye, the blast collided with Pesha's own zero. Boom. A sharp explosion echoed through the air. Tesra's zero completely overwhelmed Pesha's, pushing it back inch by inch. Pesha gritted his teeth and refused to back down, pouring all his spiritual pressure into maintaining it. Behind him, was Lady Neliel. Neliel. She stared blankly at Pesha's back, her body trembling slightly. Suddenly, she groaned and clutched her head, as if hit by a wave of dizziness. Flickers of blurry images began to flash through her mind. Midoriko gently patted her head, then turned to look at Pesha and muttered, "Didn't expect that. He's pretty loyal. Still. There's no need to be that heroic." She could tell Pesha intended to sacrifice himself. "Leave it to me." Kikyo stepped forward, drew her bow, and aimed it directly at Tessera. Buzz! A burst of holy light surged along the arrow. Demon-breaking arrow, she whispered. The arrow shot forward in an instant, slicing through the sky with a sound that drowned out even the Zero. The fierce cyclone burst through the purple beam and struck head-on. Buzz! In a flash, the holy light consumed the entire Zero and turned it bright white. Tessera's casual expression froze. His eye widened in alarm. Chi-chi! A burning sensation filled his chest. The next second, the sacred arrow blasted into his chest with a thud. Gaya! Tessera's eye bulged. Purifying power surged through him, causing his body to spasm violently. Moments later, his mouth hung open, drool spilling from the corners. His gaze turned lifeless. Then he fell backward onto the sand with a thud, unmoving. Kikyo calmly lowered her bow. Doesn't seem very strong. This was the first humanoid hollow they had encountered besides Neliel. They had expected it to be more troublesome. But he wasn't much different from the others they'd fought. Midoriko stroked her chin and casually guessed, he probably had the strength of a high-class devil. Beside her, Neliel blinked, clearly confused. The bad guy was defeated by Kikyo? Amazing! Neliel's eyes sparkled as she looked at Kikyo, the shrine maiden in red and white, with awe. Overhead, Pesha scratched his head. Wait! What just happened? He had been prepared to die buying time for Lady Neliel. But did he survive? What exactly had that human woman done? Just one arrow. Pesha glanced at Kikyo with lingering fear. Recalling the earlier confrontation, he began to tremble. He'd been to the gates of death and come back. Thankfully. It seemed Lady Neliel had a good relationship with these people. Pesha's heart grew uneasy. Nearby, Maiko poked Tessera's limp body with a stick. He seems alive. Should we turn him into a soul pearl? A high-class devil-level soul would provide a solid stat boost. Thinking of this, Maiko looked at Kikyo expectantly. Kikyo smiled. Up to you. Then I won't hold back. Maiko beamed, then extended her hand. Spirit Devour. Buzz. A vortex began to form in her palm. The next second, Tessera's body started to contort. The sharp pain yanked him back from unconsciousness. Gah! He gritted his teeth in agony, his body twisting violently. What are you doing? His voice trembled. He struggled to speak, trying to resist. But the demon-breaking arrow that had struck him was infused with the purest purification power. His strength had been completely drained. Maiko's face remained blank as she continued the technique. She was already very practiced. At first, she had felt uncomfortable using Spirit Devour. But now, she was used to it. Amid Tessera's screams. Soon, a purple soul pearl formed in Maiko's palm. She took a deep breath, then absorbed it. Woo! After a while, having fully absorbed Tessera's soul, a glint shone in Maiko's golden eyes. Ever since coming to Hueco Mundo, she had been feasting on delicious spiritual energy every day. Her growth in ability had been tremendous. She wondered. Should she ask Lynn to update her status? Not far away. Watching Tessera be reduced to a soul pearl, Pesha gulped hard. These people. Were they really human? Midoriko glanced around, and after confirming there were no more threats, turned her attention to Pesha. Seeing this, Pesha's entire body stiffened. What now? Tell me about Neliel. It was clear that Tessera Lindocruz had come for Neliel. Midoriko narrowed her eyes slightly, staring silently at Pesha Gwadok. Pesha's body tensed. After a brief pause, he looked at the confused Neliel, his expression growing complicated. A few seconds passed. Pesha slowly began to explain everything. After a while, Midoriko looked at Neliel in astonishment. This little girl. She actually had such an origin? Hueco Mundo. The Espada. Hearing that, Midoriko's eyes gleamed. It aligned with the information Lord Lin had shared. But Neliel was a former Espada? And she ranked no 3. This. Midoriko looked at the seemingly harmless and adorable girl. She really didn't seem to have anything particularly special, just an innocent little girl? It was hard to imagine that she had once been such a powerful existence. But if that was the case, then Neliel's value was incredibly high, wasn't it? The former number 3 Espada must have had strength comparable to an ultimate class devil. Midoriko's heart stirred. She was even tempted to offer Neliel directly to Lin. Kikyo was more straightforward. She squatted down and asked seriously, do you want to join a devil peerage? Neliel tilted her head. Devil peerage? What's that? Is it tasty? She blinked, touching her belly, and a bit of clear drool ran down the corner of her mouth. Kikyo. All right. She's definitely not mature yet. Both her body and memory have regressed. How can I get her to join the peerage? Midoriko gently patted Neliel's head. Neliel, do you want to get your memories back? Neliel widened her eyes, blinked a few times, then nodded earnestly. I do. Even though Pesha was kind to her, she didn't know why. She wanted to remember. And she clenched her fists. Neliel will beat up all the bad guys who bullied me. Even though her mental age was still childlike, she wasn't stupid. Pesha said that the old Neliel was very strong. If she could regain her memories, she'd be able to drive the bad guys away herself. Good girl. Midoriko nodded with satisfaction. Wasn't that enough? Even if she didn't know how to restore Neliel's memories, Lord Lin probably had a way. Besides, during the reincarnation ritual, the negative statuses of peerage members were also repaired. Amnesia should be fixable, right? Seeing this, Maiko volunteered, in that case, let me take Neliel to see Lord Lin. I was planning to renew my blessing anyway. Midoriko nodded. Then I'll leave Neliel to you. Elsewhere. Pesha opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but in front of these women, Pesha didn't have the right to voice any demands. Apparently, they were going to take Lady Neliel to see someone? Pesha felt uneasy. And could her memories really be restored? A moment later, a magic circle flickered atop the white sand. Midoriko looked at the hesitant Pesha, thought for a moment, then said, take him too. Maybe he can get a job in hell. Pesha. Hell? Job? He didn't quite get it. But did that mean he could tag along? Thinking of that, Pesha's eyes lit up with joy. He would have felt uneasy if only Lady Neliel went. He looked at Midoriko gratefully. Then, the magic circle activated. The figures of Maiko and the other two vanished instantly. After a while, hell. Maiko met Lynn. She held Neliel's hand, who looked around curiously. As for Pesha, well, he was sent away. Naturally, he was just waiting outside. Without Lord Lin's permission, no one could enter his room. When Lin saw Maiko and Neliel, there was no surprise on his face. Midoriko had already informed him through the group chat before they arrived. Lin's gaze landed on Neliel, examining her carefully. She was indeed a child. She was even cuter than his 3 million lolis. When he recalled Neliel's mature form, Lin's expression turned a bit strange. The contrast. He liked it. Neliel tugged on Maiko's sleeve, hiding behind her while peeking out at Lin with half her face. He's a very handsome big brother. Lin looked away, then turned to Maiko and smiled. Come here, Maiko. I'll help renew your blessing first. Yes. Maiko's face flushed slightly. It had only been a few days, but seeing Lin again made her feel a little shy. She pursed her lips, removed her clothes, then turned and showed her back to Lin. Neliel. Her eyes were full of confusion. Why did she take off her clothes? She blinked, brimming with curiosity. Soon. Maiko's blessing update was complete. Lin glanced at the sheet and said, not bad. Your magic has reached A rank, and all other stats are at B rank. You'll probably level up soon. Even though Lin had expected it, he was still impressed with Maiko's progress. He stroked his chin. Looks like Hueco Mundo suits you well. Compared to the extremely low-quality cursed spirits in the main world, the hollows of Hueco Mundo were far superior. There were plenty of Minos-class hollows too. And they were easy to find, far more efficient than the main world. After handing the updated blessing sheet to Maiko, she beamed upon seeing her rapid growth. I guess I'll be catching up to Midoriko and the others soon. Maybe even surpass Yuta and the rest. Thinking that, Maiko's heart fluttered with excitement. Meanwhile, Lin turned his attention to Neliel and smiled. Your turn, little one. Hi. Neliel blinked, confused. Seeing this, Lin gestured toward Maiko. Just do what she did. Like Maiko? Neliel looked at the naked Maiko and seemed to understand. In a flash, she stripped and ran to Lin with small, quick steps, tilting her head. Like this. Lin paused for a moment, a bit surprised by her quick response. But, considering Neliel's current mental state, it wasn't unexpected. At her current age, there were things she simply didn't understand. Lin picked her up and sat her on his lap, facing away. He summoned an evil piece and pressed it gently against Neliel's back. Neliel blinked as a buzzing sensation filled her head, leaving her dazed. Under the effect of the reincarnation ritual, something deeply buried in her mind was forcibly drawn out. Familiar yet distant memories surged through her consciousness. Ugh! Neliel frowned and let out a soft groan. At the same time, a system notification rang in Lin's ears. Ding! You have obtained the peerage member Neliel Tuidelschwank. Ding! Your peerage member Neliel Tuidelschwank has been reincarnated as a special class devil. Agility, I0. Endurance, I0. Magic, I0. Class skill. Super speed. Innate skills. Riot's resonance. The more concentrated the spiritual pressure, the greater the increase in magic power and detection range. Capable of tearing through barriers. Super speed regeneration. Heals non-lethal injuries visibly fast. Ineffective against mental damage. Dance of the Antelope King. A melee combo technique that stacks attack speed. Each hit briefly boosts agility. Emerald Core. Chant, devour the heavens, horn of sorrow. Fires high-density green energy from fingertips. Can be charged for AoE bombardment or used in spirit-type attacks. Flash reprise. Absorbs enemy's Zero into her mouth, adds her own energy, and reflects it back. Funeral of the Hollow King. Chant, shatter the king's crown. Sacrifices her regeneration to release a 100-meter wide dark red energy beam. Returning Antelope Knight. Release phrase, sing praises, Antelope Knights. Activates main form. Temporarily boosts all stats to X level. Emerald Javelin. A special technique usable in her blade retreat form. Hurls a high-speed, spinning double-headed spear. Ironcar's Reserve. When facing higher-tier enemies, automatically adjusts durability and magic to match. Remnant of Memory. When near death, reverts to her child form, nullifies all negative statuses, and restores 50% spiritual pressure, 7-day cooldown. Healing Saliva. Restorative property that can heal injuries. Night Patrolman. In darkness or enchanted areas, increases stealth by 50%. The first strike always lands a critical hit. Antelope Rider Devil. The Triumph of the Antelope Queen. Increases attack by 30% per 10 meters traveled while charging. Automatically activates Antelope Horn defense when hit. Under Moonlight, all stat values receive a plus 500 correction. Deals 300% true damage to Hollow/Evil type enemies. Automatically triggers Hollow King's Zero when dying. Devouring an enemy's soul core restores her body. Emerald Trail. Chant, O horn of the antelope that pierces the heavens, shatter the triple barrier of spirit particles. Summons 3 emerald spirit spears. Each spear auto-locks onto vital points and carries spatial shock effects. Devil Transformation, Emerald Core Burst. Development Skill. Aerial Cavalry Combat, S. Lynn smacked his lips lightly as he read the list of skills appearing on Neliel's back. As expected of the former number 3 Espada. If she hadn't been ambushed by a combined force, Neutra and the others wouldn't have been able to reduce her to that state. Excellent. Another powerful general. And with her joining his peerage, Lynn's own power received another small boost. However, now that he had transcended, even the feedback from the ultimate class devil wasn't enough to strengthen him anymore. Satan class. Lynn frowned slightly. There probably weren't many who could reach that realm. It felt like the priority should be raising his peerage's strength. While Lynn was lost in thought, Neliel's body began to change atop his lap. Strands of spiritual particles began to swirl around her, and her young childlike form rapidly matured. The round and innocent face vanished, replaced by one of mature beauty. Her light green hair now fell past her waist. Her golden green eyes were deep and mysterious. The rose-red facial tattoo remained vivid. Her figure became curvy and full, forming a stark contrast with her previous appearance. Maiko, witnessing Neliel's transformation, was utterly baffled. Is this still Neliel? She reflexively compared the two forms in her mind and felt a subtle sense of inferiority hit her. Meanwhile, Lynn, now aware of the warmth on his thighs, returned from his thoughts and looked at Neliel's back with a raised brow. Looks like she's recovered. Lynn wasn't surprised. But the reincarnation ceremony didn't just restore her memories. It had also returned her to her original form. She opened her golden eyes, her expression calm. Countless thoughts rushed through her mind. Neutra Gilga. She murmured his name, a sharp gleam flashing in her eyes as she clenched her fists. She would pay him back. Suddenly, she felt someone pinch her waist. Neliel jolted, standing up at once. Her massive chest bounced wildly. She instinctively tensed her body and turned her head, only to see Lynn's face. She froze. That man. The one who restored her memories and powers. Midoriko, Kikyo. And him. Although she didn't fully understand what he had done, the wariness in Neliel's eyes began to fade. Lynn didn't pay attention to her expression. He simply tossed her a sheet of paper. Your blessing status sheet. Take a look. Neliel caught it instinctively and glanced down at the master column. Master, Lynn Valifor. So. She had a new king? Neliel blinked in realization. Without looking at the rest, she dropped to one knee and declared without hesitation, My king, Neliel II Idolschwank pledges loyalty to you. Lynn tilted her chin up with a faint smile. You accepted that pretty quickly. Neliel lowered her gaze in silence. He had truly helped her. So. She had no complaints about offering her allegiance. Lynn was pleased with her attitude. Then, his gaze dropped to her body and he said, Get dressed first. Neliel blinked, glanced downward. Her chest was shaking. She stiffened. Despite her mature beauty, a touch of shyness spread across her face. With a faint flash of light, spiritual energy condensed over her body. Soon, a flowing green dress covered her. Only then did Neliel breathe a sigh of relief, though her cheeks still burned. Lynn remained calm and tossed her a manual. Neliel caught it, looking at him in confusion. This contains details about our peerage. Take a look. Peerage? Neliel's heart stirred. That word felt strangely familiar. Like a home? She looked up at Lynn, then recalled Midoriko and the others. Yes. This place was clearly different from Las Noches. After all, that place was just a cold imitation of power. There was no humanity. Even Aizen Sosuke. Neliel had always felt a chill in his presence. But here, it was warm. Neliel liked this feeling. With that in mind, she opened the manual, eager to learn more about her new home. Soon after, as she read through sections, Neliel's expression turned shocked. This? Other worlds? Lynn and the others were from different worlds. It felt like she had joined some kind of extraordinary organization. And the blessing system, that must be what was on that sheet. Leveling up. Neliel's golden eyes sparkled. With this system, even someone like her could eventually be surpassed, right? That thought stirred something in her. After being ambushed by Neutra Gilga, she had realized something important. Her strength wasn't enough. If she had been stronger, not even Neutra and Sailaporo Grands together would have brought her down. So, she would become stronger. Neliel's eyes hardened with determination. Her fists clenched. With the blessing system, her long stagnant strength could rise once again. But first, Neutra Gilga and Sailaporo Grands would become the stepping stones for her evolution. Thinking that, her gaze grew sharp and resolute. The world of the Soul Reapers. Hell! Neliel walked out of Lynn's office in a daze. Peshek, who had been waiting outside for a long time, widened his eyes the moment he saw her and then rushed forward excitedly. Lord Neliel, you've finally recovered. Pesha. Neliel fell silent when she saw the joy on his face. Because of her, Pesha's mask had been shattered, and he had regressed from an Arankar back to a hollow. Thinking of this, Neliel's expression grew even colder. Neutra Gilga. You deserve to die. Thank you for all your hard work during this time. Pesha had tears in his eyes as he kept shaking his head, so emotional he could barely speak. Seeing this, Neliel gave a slight twitch of her lips. Let's go, Hueco Mundo. At that, she said in a cold voice, some people must pay the price for what they've done. But Pesha looked a little hesitant. Don't worry. Neliel's eyes sparkled. She clenched her fists and felt the new power surging through her. In a low voice, she said, I've obtained new strength from Lord Lynn. Back when she was still ranked third among the Espada, Neutra Gilga wasn't even her match. He had only dared to sneak attack her in collaboration with the other Espada. Now that she'd gained new power, she was fully confident. Even against two of them at once. Hueco Mundo. Yatsuya Maiko and Neliel soon found Midoriko and the others. Nello. Midoriko was stunned when she saw Neliel's curvy adult form. This was too big of a change, wasn't it? Neliel smiled faintly. Sister Midoriko. She still used the childhood name she'd called her by. Midoriko had a strange look on her face. It was fine when she called her that in her child form, but now. She glanced downward slightly and twitched her lips. You're clearly a grown woman now, is it really appropriate to call me sister? Neliel's return and her transformation stirred up quite the reaction among some of the leveling teams. Eventually, Midoriko smiled and said, Welcome to the peerage. Neliel froze for a moment, then smiled and nodded solemnly. Although she didn't fully understand everyone's personalities yet, she could already feel it. This place was nothing like Las Noches. And after spending some time together, Neliel had gradually gotten to know a few of them. She liked the atmosphere here. That's right. These two are Ingvild and Kateria. They arrived after you left. Hello. Ingvild Leviathan greeted quietly. And was immediately smacked on the head. Kateria Leviathan frowned. As a descendant of the Leviathan bloodline, can you show a little more pride? Ugh. Ingvild shrank back. Kateria rolled her eyes. TCH. With this kind of personality, how's he ever going to make it into Lynn's bed? Seems like I'll have to do something about it. On the side, Neliel quickly got acquainted with the two. Inwardly, she thought. Two more powerful fighters. But more than that. Her eyes lingered on Kateria Leviathan. Strong. That sensation was like standing in front of one of the Espada. Kateria felt Neliel's gaze. She smiled slightly, crossed her arms, and said, I've heard all about you. How about it? As a welcome party for the new member, want to go on a rampage? A rampage? Neliel blinked, confused. Kateria pointed toward Las Noches. Her smile widened into a devilish grin. Of course, by turning that place upside down. There was a flash of excitement in her eyes as she recalled the time Lord Lynn had personally annihilated the old Mu faction's stronghold. Back then, she had been nothing more than background decoration. In the end, she'd become Lynn's reward. This time, she wanted to prove herself too. To show the might of Leviathan. Neliel's eyes widened in disbelief. Tear down Las Noches. She fell silent. Even she had only planned on luring out Neutra Gilga and the others for a personal reckoning. But Las Noches. That place belonged to him. Aizen Sosuke. Neliel opened her mouth, wanting to dissuade her. But Kateria raised her hand to interrupt. Don't worry, I've already cleared it with Lord Lynn. Hearing that, Neliel closed her mouth. If it was Lynn's will, then, as his knight, she only needed to charge forward. With that thought, her eyes became resolute and unwavering. Kateria narrowed her eyes. Very good eyes. Well then, let's assign combat operations. Well, combat operations was more like dividing opponents to fight. Meanwhile, in Las Noches, Neutra Gilga frowned. Where the hell did that bastard Tessera go? Main world. War King's territory. After several days of negotiations, the Lion King organization finally confirmed the location of Beast Vassal number 12. Dimitri Vatler's death at the hands of the Lion King organization had created a huge ripple effect. During the talks, the War King hadn't been particularly friendly. But Yukari only said one thing. Go speak with Lord Lin. The War King fell silent. He was far more informed than the Lion King's people. After all, he was the true ancestor of vampires, with deep connections across major factions. The story of Lin wiping out the old Mu faction's base single-handedly was already well known. Although he was a top-level combatant himself, his strength barely measured up to a regular Mu. If he had infiltrated that base alone, never mind destroying it, escaping with his life would have been a miracle. So he had no illusions about Lin's power. That was someone he absolutely could not afford to offend. He'd lived in peace for many years. He didn't want unnecessary trouble. However, as a commander, he couldn't just stand by while one of his own was killed. What's worse? That incident had earned him ridicule from Aswad Ghul and Giada Kukulkan. At the thought of them, Ki Juranbarada's lips curled slightly. If it had been them, they'd have lost their minds. That woman, Giada, she might have even ended up warming the devil's bed after getting beat down. He shook his head at the idea. But he still couldn't just do nothing. Otherwise, it would look like the War King was weak. And that would be unacceptable. So, all that was left was to play the card of the flame banquet. Ki Uranbaradan narrowed his eyes. Elsewhere. After leaving the War King's territory, Yukari sent word to the Lion King organization. Number 12 is imprisoned on the island of Gozo, to the north. The island of Gozo. After receiving the message from Himeragi Yukina over the phone, Lin's eyes flickered slightly. He had some impression of the location, but wasn't sure of the precise whereabouts of the beast vassal number 12. This kind of trivial task was better left to the Lion King organization. He glanced at the virtual screen showing Hueco Mundo, then sent a message to Himeragi Yukina. Tell the Lion King organization to pinpoint the exact location of beast vassal number 12 and notify me. Main world. Lion King organization. Himeragi Yukina received the message and relayed Lin's instructions to Shirin Okariki and the others. Yukari shrugged. Well, guess there's more work again. She looked at Shirina and smirked slightly. No way, it's me again. Shirina smiled faintly. Those who are capable should do more. Yukari held her forehead helplessly. Is there seriously no one else left in the Lion King organization? Shirina sighed. When it comes to matters involving the fourth progenitor, those shrine maidens are just not reliable. What about her? Yukari pointed at Koyomi Shizuka, who was quietly seated beside them. Her combat abilities should be far better than mine, right? Shirina replied, but she's not as versatile as you. And Shirina glanced at Koyomi, motioning for her to speak. Koyomi adjusted her glasses and calmly said, I still have to finish my studies. What kind of reason is that? Yukari was speechless. She silently turned to look at Shirina again. Shirina spread her hands. You know what my combat ability is like. Are you really confident sending me instead? Fine. Yukari sighed, her eyes narrowing slightly. I'll handle this, but if there's ever a mission involving serving the Devil King in the future, that one's on you. At that moment, Shirina's body stiffened. The smile on her face could no longer hold. Seeing her reaction, Yukari puffed out her chest proudly. Shirina fell silent, her face darkening with uncertainty. Lynn's words echoed in her mind. Very suitable to become a dependent. Thinking of that, Shirana sighed. Lynn hadn't hidden his intentions at all. Even though they were working for him now, everyone seemed to be ignoring one thing. They had already been targeted by Lynn. Becoming part of Lynn's peerage. It was only a matter of time. But it might not be a bad thing. After Himuragi Yukina's introduction, both the blessings system and the resources from other worlds had left a deep impression on them. Either way, just let it happen. Shirana calmed her thoughts and nodded. Don't worry. My ability isn't useful right now, so if anyone's going to serve Lynn, I'll go first. Oh. Yukari raised an eyebrow, looking surprised. So proactive. Even Koyomi turned her head slightly, a ripple appearing in her calm gaze. Shirana smiled faintly and said. Well. You can't avoid it forever, right? Yukari was stunned for a moment, then muttered helplessly. Guess that's true. Shirana continued. If I join early, maybe I'll be a few steps ahead of you. Koyomi. Yukari rolled her eyes. Still. That blessings system. It broke through natural limits and allowed for infinite growth. Just thinking about it made Yukari feel a little dazed. As an immortal elf who had lived for hundreds of years, even she had been shocked by its potential. And the best part? Everyone could receive it. As long as one joined Lynn's peerage, they would be granted this blessing. It was like a straightforward path to godhood. The price was merely becoming Lynn's dependent. But that was completely different from being a regular devil's follower. It was more like the relationship between a god and their apostles. Two entirely different levels. Yukari glanced at her disciple and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Who would have thought? Yukina ended up with the biggest windfall. With a little more time, and the help of the blessing system, she would probably surpass them before long. Not to mention the Snowdrift Wolf Schneewalzer, which held immense potential. It was foreseeable. Yukina would surely become a powerhouse in the future. Maybe even stronger than herself and the three saints. Of course. If they also obtained the blessing system, it was hard to say. Inside the Lion King organization. After some more small talk, they began discussing the operation at Gozo Island. Soon after, Yukari set out for Gozo Island. Himuragi Yukina accompanied her. She would temporarily act as Lynn's mobile coordinate beacon. Meanwhile, at the private Shuchen Academy, Natsuki Minamiya received a commission. Natsuki raised an eyebrow. Such a generous reward. She looked at the long string of zeros on her phone and blinked in surprise. Seriously? This was quite the big job. Gozo Archaeology. It looked like a routine assignment. But with that kind of payout, there was no way it was simple. Still. It was a lot. She had recently developed a taste for rare black teas and wanted to stock up. This money came just in time. At the same time, the Black Death Emperor Front organization received the news. Beast Vassal No 12. Christophe Gardos frowned slightly. This news was a little too convenient. Like it was being spoon-fed to them. Still. The information came from the War King. It shouldn't be false. Thinking that, Christophe Gardos grinned, his wide mouth forming a savage arc. Send word. Head to Gozo and retrieve what's mine. Gozo Island. A scientific expedition team had set up a base. Akatsuki Gaja stroked his chin, staring solemnly in one direction. His gaze seemed to penetrate the thick ice, seeing deep within. Beside him, a blonde woman in an elegant dress frowned. Is the fourth progenitor really in there? Akatsuki Gaja retracted his gaze and smiled. At this point, don't you have to trust my judgment? Liana Caruana folded her arms and fell silent. I just hope my investment wasn't in vain. Akatsuki Gaja narrowed his eyes. You think I came here for archaeology? When you hear something like fourth progenitor, you just know you're getting into trouble. But that was just the reality of being an adult. His archaeological team needed funding. No way around it. Liana looked at the ice wall in front of them. We've exhausted almost every method. How do you plan on breaking through it? Though she had her doubts about Akatsuki Gaja's judgment, this bizarre ice wall did give her hope. Even her beast couldn't break it. That was anything but normal. She exhaled deeply and clenched her fists. The fourth progenitor. She had to find it. For the revival of her family. Relax. Akatsuki Gaja shrugged. The one who can break through this ice, is already in the sky. In the sky? Liana was surprised. Above Japan, on a flight to Gozo. Akatsuki Kojo and Akatsuki Nagisa sat side by side. That guy suddenly called you to such a remote place, who knows what he's thinking? Kojo looked annoyed, clearly displeased with his father's last-minute summons. Nagisa tried to comfort him. Don't worry. It'll be fine. Maybe. He just wants to take us to the North Pole for a vacation. She smiled, cheerful and energetic as always, completely at ease. Seeing her like that, Koju couldn't help but smile too. Yeah, let's hope so. But he never had much faith in that unreliable father of his. And heading to the North Pole? What kind of absurd idea was that? Sigh. Just thinking about it made him feel uneasy. A vague sense of foreboding lingered in his heart. Akatsuki Koju's premonition wasn't wrong. The moment he arrived at Gozo and saw Akatsuki Koju and the professional team behind him, his eyelid twitched uncontrollably. Kojo looked straight at Akatsuki Koju and questioned. This is what you meant by coming here to have fun? Haha. Akatsuki Koju scratched the back of his head and replied. It's the same thing if we finish work first, then have fun. Koju. You old bastard. He glared furiously at the irresponsible man in front of him. Come on, Nagisa, we're going back to Japan. Bang. Suddenly, Akatsuki Koju placed a large hand on Koju's shoulder. Koju, now isn't the time to act willful. Koju tried to struggle free, but quickly realized he couldn't shake off Koju's grip at all. A trace of shock flashed in his eyes. Since when was this old man so strong? Koju suddenly realized he didn't know his father as well as he thought. But that didn't stop him from being pissed. He and Nagisa were just kids. And this man had dragged them here for some so-called work. Looking at the fuming Koju, Koju rubbed his temples. Well, it's fine. Nagisa stepped in to smooth things over. You're the only one who understands Dad. Koju looked moved. On the other side, Liana frowned and asked. These are the two people you said could solve the problem. Two, kids? She looked clearly skeptical. Koju laughed and said. Don't worry. With Nagisa here, there's absolutely no issue. Liana looked at Nagisa in disbelief. Wait, she's the key? Huh? Me? Nagisa pointed at herself, visibly nervous. Koju frowned. What exactly do you want Nagisa to do? Koju patted Koju's shoulder, reassuringly. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Koju didn't believe a word of it. Only suspicion filled his eyes. Before long, the group reached the ice field. The moment Koju approached, he felt a chill run down his spine. His throat tightened, as though invisible hands were squeezing it. Gulp. He swallowed nervously and said with a trembling voice. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with this place? Whatever was buried down there. It definitely wasn't something normal. And this guy had brought Nagisa to a place like this. Damn old man. Seeing Koju's horrified face, Koju shrugged. If you're scared, you can leave. Tisk. Koju looked disgruntled and muttered. If I go, I'm taking Nagisa with me. He turned toward her, just about to speak. But then stopped. Nagisa's eyes had gone blank. A strange aura began to rise from her body. Whoosh. Suddenly, wind surged beneath her feet, lifting her petite body gently off the ground. Koju's eyes widened, his heart tightening. Nagisa. He shouted and rushed forward to pull her down. Bang. Just as he reached out, Koju stopped him cold. If you don't want anything to happen to Nagisa, don't touch her. Koju froze, then shouted. It's your fault. You're the one who brought her to this cursed place. Koju didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on Nagisa. Gone was the usual carefree look. His expression had turned serious. As I thought. He murmured to himself. Everything was going according to his expectations. With Nagisa's aptitude as a spiritual medium, she could definitely resonate with the lingering will sealed here. Liana stared blankly at the floating Nagisa. After a moment, she muttered in a complicated tone. Possession by a lingering thought. A shrine maiden with spiritual aptitude might be capable of something like that. But if this really was the site of the fourth progenitor, then the time this tomb had existed was immeasurable. There shouldn't be much of a lingering will left after all this time. To resonate with such a thought, was more difficult than ascending to heaven. She had never heard of any shrine maiden succeeding at such a feat. But this girl had done it. She's really your daughter. Liana glanced at Koju, then back at Nagisa, her tone questioning. Koju straightened with pride. See? Good genes. PFF. Liana smiled dryly. Maybe try getting a paternity test first. Jealous. Koju clicked his tongue and refocused on Nagisa. Liana also calmed herself and waited quietly for what would happen next. Koju, on the other hand, was still visibly tense. He didn't dare make a move, afraid of harming Nagisa. A few seconds later, the airflow around Nagisa stopped, but her eyes remained lifeless. She floated toward the ice, raised her hand. Buzz. A brilliant light flashed. The thick ice suddenly vanished. A swirling black void appeared in its place. This is... Liana was stunned, staring at the dark vortex in disbelief. Koju stroked his chin in amazement. The fourth progenitor's tomb is located in a separate dimension. What a bold structure! Another dimension. Liana blinked, a little surprised. But she didn't dwell on it. Is it dangerous? Relax. Gajo smiled confidently. The ones who built it wouldn't want to get trapped in it themselves. Liana breathed a little easier, then turned toward the portal. In that case, let's head in. Wait. Koju suddenly called out. The fourth progenitor. That legendary vampire is real. He was shocked. Why am I suddenly part of something this huge? Gajo shrugged. Go in and see for yourself. You still plan on taking us in? Kojo looked incredulous. He knew his father was irresponsible, but this was a new low. Bringing kids into a place involving the fourth progenitor? Seriously? His gaze shifted to Nagisa, whose eyes were still empty. Taking her in like this, isn't that way too dangerous? Gajo ignored his frustration. After a moment of thought, he said. To be precise, we are taking Nagisa in. You're not important. Because they didn't know what lay inside, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Nagisa's spiritual power might still be needed. Bringing her was the safest choice. Koju. He gritted his teeth. Then I'm coming too. Seeing that, Gajo gave a subtle smile. Koju really is a good older brother. TCH better than you as a father, at least. Koju's voice was filled with annoyance. Gajo didn't mind the jab. Liana, who had been waiting impatiently, urged. Are you done? Let's go already. Gajo shrugged. Should be fine. He glanced at Koju. Koju turned his face away, not meeting his gaze, but didn't protest either. Seeing this, Gajo nodded at Liana. He stepped forward, stopping before the swirling portal. He took a deep breath, his eyes flickering with anticipation. Even after all the excavation sites he had been to, this was his first time facing something related to the fourth progenitor. It was impossible not to be excited. And the entrance alone was extraordinary. His heart beat faster. In the next second, he raised his foot and stepped toward the portal. But just then, a lazy voice rang out from behind them. Mind if I hitch a ride? Island of Gozo. In front of the entrance to the underground mausoleum. A lazy female voice suddenly echoed through the space. Akatsuki Koju's pupils contracted, and he paused mid-step. Liana's body tensed. She immediately turned around, her piercing blue eyes locking onto the source of the voice, alert and wary. Then, a blonde beauty dressed in cyan came into view. She rested one hand on her waist, eyes carrying a lazy expression, but her face held a mature aura tempered by the passage of time. Behind her stood a slightly younger girl with long black hair, her eyes full of curiosity as she observed the surroundings. Who is it? Liana let out a soft cry and instinctively clenched her fists. Her muscles tightened, and the magic within her surged, on the verge of summoning her beasts. Relax. Yukari glanced at her and said, Lion King Organization. Do you mind if I take a look inside? Lion King Organization. Hearing this, both Liana and Gajo were stunned. Clearly, they had heard of the Lion King Organization before. But why was the Lion King Organization showing up in Gozo? At that moment, Liana's expression turned grim. After a pause, she spoke coldly, Your Lion King Organization is also interested in the fourth true ancestor. She was clearly displeased. She had invested time and resources for over a month, working non-stop. Now, these so-called people from the Lion King Organization suddenly appeared, hoping to reap the benefits? Even though her family had declined, she wasn't someone to be pushed around. Corner her, and she'd bite back hard. Besides, the fourth true ancestor was vampire business. Why was a human organization sticking its nose in? The more she thought about it, the darker her expression became. On the other side, Yukari's eyes lit up at her words. This really is the place where the fourth true ancestor is sealed. She narrowed her eyes. Originally, she had simply seen some people excavating and decided to bring Yukina to scout the area. She didn't expect to stumble upon something this big. Liana. So you didn't even know? She felt like she'd said something incredibly stupid. Still. Even if Yukari hadn't known, with the strange space in front of them, she would have figured it out eventually. Liana's eyes narrowed. She raised her hand and waved. A faint ripple passed through the air. Skull, Heitai. As the words fell, two massive wolves appeared behind her. A woo. With one cloaked in molten lava and the other bathed in moonlight, they howled into the sky. The sheer pressure in the air trembled from their power. Yukari raised an eyebrow. She knew she was trying to swoop in and take credit, which wasn't exactly honorable, but she had her own mission. Since negotiation was off the table, there was only one option left. Yukina. Without hesitation, Himuragi Yukina pulled the snowdrift wolf Schneewalzer from her backpack. Clang! The spear emitted a crisp ring as its blade gleamed under the sunlight. The moment she saw it, Liana's heart skipped a beat. Her blood began to stir. Not even the extreme Arctic cold could suppress the heat spreading through her body. What was this? There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes as she stared intently at the spear in Yukina's hands. This weapon, something wasn't right. Even so, Liana showed no signs of retreat. The fourth true ancestor was key to her family's revival. She wouldn't allow any interference. A standoff filled the air. Akatsuki Koja surveyed the situation, then subtly positioned himself in front of Nagisa, shielding her. He gave Giju a frantic look. Find an opportunity to slip away. That's what his eyes were clearly saying. Giju gave a small okay sign in return, raising a confident eyebrow. Leave it to me. Koju. Seeing Giju step forward, Koju's mouth twitched. Liana, who noticed him move, frowned. You want me to hand over this mausoleum? Don't be so dramatic, Giju shrugged. We could cooperate with the Lion King organization. After all, we don't know what kind of danger is inside. With more firepower, we'll be safer. Liana's expression didn't change. Which means we'll have to split what's inside the mausoleum. Seeing her hesitation, Giju didn't press further. Instead, he stared at the weapon in Yukina's hands. If I remember right, that spear is the mechanical demon purging assault spear Mark 7. Oh. Yukari looked at him with interest. You're pretty knowledgeable for a human. Giju smirked. I'm an archaeologist, after all. Heh, archaeology. Yukari sneered. That's what you're calling it now. She looked past him toward the dimensional rift. Digging into otherworldly spaces and recognizing the snowdrift wolf? This guy clearly wasn't just any ordinary archaeologist. Meanwhile, Liana's frown deepened at Giju's words. A weapon especially effective against vampires. As a noble vampire, she was quite aware of its capabilities. This was problematic. Also, the Lion King organization entrusted such a weapon to a mere high school girl? Giju whispered, Liana, you should understand how effective that weapon is against your kind. Don't be deceived by the fact that it's in a student's hands. The weapon itself ignores the difference in power between wielder and target. You don't have to spell it out for me. Liana clenched her fists, her face still troubled. Restoring her family had never been easy. Seeing this, Giju couldn't help but smile slightly. Finally, after all her nagging over the past few weeks, it felt refreshing to see her humbled a bit. Suppressing the smirk, he asked flatly, so, what's your decision? Liana gave him a look, silent for a moment. Then she sighed, dismissing her two summoned beasts. In any case, she had come to pledge loyalty to the fourth true ancestor. Letting them enter wouldn't cause her any loss, right? She consoled herself and looked up, speaking coldly, we can cooperate. Upon hearing that, Yukari smiled slightly and nodded to Yukina. Yukina understood and placed the snowdrift wolf back in her backpack. Liana let out a barely noticeable breath of relief. She still needed to revive her family. She couldn't afford to throw her life away now. Still, if she was going to agree to a partnership, she needed to set terms. She didn't want it to seem like she gave in out of fear. Her eyes flickered. We can cooperate, but... She turned toward Koju and Nagisa. Once we enter the mausoleum, I want you to guarantee the safety of these two. Yukari blinked in mild surprise. A vampire, concerned about the safety of humans? Interesting. She gave Liana a curious glance. This vampire might not be a bad person. Koju was also stunned. He hadn't expected Liana's condition to be his and Nagisa's safety. He was dragged into this without any warning, but... This blonde sister might actually be a decent person? Still. It looked like he'd have to go underground too. Thinking of that, he wanted to cry but had no tears. He glanced at Nagisa, who stared blankly ahead, unresponsive, and sighed inwardly. All right, I accept. Yukari nodded without hesitation. Even without Liana's request, the Lion King organization would never leave two children to fend for themselves in a dangerous place. So this condition was basically meaningless to her. Good. In that case, let's head down. Seeing the cooperation established, Giju clapped his hands and urged everyone forward. Hearing that, the group exchanged glances, nodded, and walked toward the dark abyss ahead. At the same time, above them in the space distorted by magic, a petite figure hidden within the void watched everything unfold. Arctic. At the entrance to the underground mausoleum. Once Yukari and the others entered the dimensional rift, Natsuki Minamiya's figure slowly emerged from the air. She looked toward the dark void ahead and furrowed her brow. This is, so-called archaeology. Taking out her phone, she glanced at the message sent by the client, her expression growing gloomier by the second. All she wanted was to make a little extra money to buy some expensive black tea. How did this turn into something this dangerous? The fourth true ancestor. She mouthed the words, her expression serious. This wasn't something to be taken lightly. Still. She looked again at the unpaid balance and sighed helplessly. Well, since I'm already here. It would be a complete waste to return empty-handed. Besides, the client hadn't set any real conditions. All she had to do was follow the group and assist in the archaeological work. To be honest, she didn't fully understand what the client was after. Was it really just archaeology? Or was she being dragged into this chaos surrounding the fourth true ancestor? After pondering for a moment, Natsuki gave up on thinking too deeply. With her space manipulation abilities, she had nothing to fear from some mysterious plot. But if she didn't get paid afterward, she would definitely make that client regret it. Decision made, Natsuki stepped toward the dark dimensional rift without hesitation. Underground tomb. Yukari and the others entered. In the next instant, an icy blue brilliance filled their vision. A frigid chill swept over the entire space. As the only ordinary person in the group, Akatsuki Kojo shivered violently, his whole body trembling from the cold. He exhaled, and a puff of white mist drifted into the air. Isn't this a little too cold? Kojo rubbed his arms in an attempt to warm up, his teeth chattering. But no one responded to him. Everyone else here wasn't exactly normal. Kojo. He gave them all a blank stare. Then he zeroed in on Kojo. But seriously? You two? Even he had betrayed the ranks of ordinary humans? It was only now that Kojo realized something was off. His so-called archaeologist father was somehow involved with vampires? And this underground mausoleum definitely wasn't ordinary. Don't tell him this was what Kojo's usual archaeology jobs looked like? Thinking about that, Kojo's expression became complicated. Dad, you're definitely hiding something big. Right. And what about Nagisa? He suddenly thought of his sister and looked over. Nagisa floated peacefully in the air, completely unaffected. Kojo. So he's the only one freezing? Kojo curled up and sighed in frustration. He felt like a husky trying to blend in with a pack of wolves. Kojo looked around cautiously, scanning the surroundings. Liana seemed a bit relieved as she sensed the cold. This level of cold must be the power of the 12th. Which meant this really was the tomb of the fourth true ancestor. Thinking that, her excitement grew. The hope of reviving her family was right before her. Liana's breathing grew rapid. She quickened her pace, moving deeper into the tomb without even realizing it. Seeing her reaction, the others followed closely behind. Soon after, a crystal-clear ice coffin appeared before them. Inside it, a delicate figure lay in what appeared to be a peaceful slumber. Her golden hair shimmered faintly, her features were flawless, and her slim figure made her look like a fairy tale doll, like a sleeping beauty resting in eternal stillness. This is... Kojo's pupils contracted sharply. A powerful wave of emotion surged in his chest. Her Majesty, the fourth true ancestor. The moment she saw the girl and felt the pressure in her bloodline, Liana instantly understood the girl's identity. Without hesitation, she dropped to one knee. Liana Caruana, sixth head of the Caruana clan, pays her respects to Her Majesty, the fourth true ancestor. Her solemn voice echoed through the chamber. But silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the tomb. Getting no response, Liana's expression grew uneasy. Yukari stepped forward, touching the ice coffin lightly. Her gaze landed on the sleeping girl inside. She hasn't awakened yet. Upon hearing this, Liana's eyes lit up with surprise. She looked at the girl in the coffin even more intently. But there was no reaction. The girl remained still, eyes closed. Liana frowned slightly. Is there any way to wake Her Majesty? Kojo shrugged. That's way beyond me. The fourth true ancestor was right in front of them. But there wasn't the slightest hint of awakening. Even with so many people intruding into her tomb. Hearing this, Liana remained silent. Compared to her frustration, Yukari was much more relaxed. In fact, she felt a little relieved the fourth true ancestor didn't wake up. After all, she really didn't want to clash with a legendary figure today. Turning to Himuragi Yukina, she said, Yukina, contact Lord Lynn. Liana instantly frowned and asked coldly, what do you mean? Yukari didn't lower her voice, drawing the attention of Kojo and the others. She said lazily, you want her to wake up, right? As your partner, I'll help share the burden. Liana hesitated for a moment, then asked seriously, this Lynn you speak of, can he wake the fourth true ancestor? Of course. Yukari nodded with a confident smile. Well, Master should be able to, right? Besides, this was just a convenient excuse to bring him here. Once Lynn arrived, what happened afterward was none of her concern. Her mission ended with getting him in front of the fourth true ancestor. Liana didn't know that. In fact, she felt somewhat grateful. Meanwhile, Kojo gave Yukari a look filled with suspicion. This woman. Was she seriously trying to trick someone? People sure are easy to fool sometimes. Kojo shook his head but didn't say anything. Well, maybe it's easier to remember a lesson after learning it the hard way. As Liana's investor, he felt it was necessary to let her experience this kind of growth. On the other side, Himuragi Yukina pulled out her phone and sent a message to Lynn. Suddenly, footsteps echoed through the underground tomb. Liana, Yukari, and the others instantly became alert. He. So the fourth true ancestor is hiding in a place like this. Before anyone appeared, a rough voice rang out. The next moment, a group of people in green military uniforms blocked their path. Then, a tall, burly man emerged from the crowd. He looked them over, his mouth curling into a sinister grin. Thanks for leading me to the fourth true ancestor. Now that your job's done, you're no longer needed. So, could you kindly die? Island of Gozo. The fourth true ancestor's underground mausoleum. A rough yet cold voice echoed throughout the mausoleum. Gulp. Akatsuki Kojo Adam's apple bobbed as he involuntarily swallowed, eyes widening in shock as he stared at the group approaching. They were tall and muscular, dressed in turquoise uniforms, but Akatsuki Kojo focused on their heads. Not human. Thick brown fur. Wolves? Bears? He stepped in front of Nagisa, his eyes turning serious. When Yukari saw the group of beastmen, a strange smile curled on his lips. Things are really heating up now. I didn't expect even the Black Death Emperor's brother to show up. What's the deal? Are beastmen interested in the fourth true ancestor now too? Brother of the Black Death Emperor? Liana and Gajo's eyes widened in shock. This guy is no ordinary person. Tisk. Liana frowned. What the hell? She had invested time, money, and manpower into this, finally making progress. Only for a bunch of outsiders to show up and reap the rewards? First it was the Lion King organization, now beastmen. If anyone else showed up next, it wouldn't even surprise her anymore. But seriously, what did these people take her for? A tool for excavating the fourth true ancestor? Liana was seriously pissed. On the other side, hearing Yukari call out his identity, the Black Death Emperor's brother crossed his arms and looked at him coldly. Looks like your background's not simple either. Although his face showed no emotion, inwardly he was a little surprised. Wasn't there supposed to be only one vampire left here? And a fallen noblewoman at that? The Lion King Organization. Yukari lazily revealed his affiliation. The Lion King Organization. The Emperor's brother narrowed his eyes. Among the demon world, that name had some weight. But in this kind of situation? Even if the War King himself showed up, there would be no retreat. Not to mention, they were a terrorist organization. A terrorist organization should act like one. Grinning menacingly, his fur-covered face twisted. Lion, tiger, whatever. I'm taking the fourth true ancestor. Yukari paused for a moment, eyes gleaming with amusement. This guy really is the living example of brute strength, no brains. Take the fourth true ancestor? Forget Lynn's connection to it for now. Just the power of the fourth true ancestor alone. You think a mere beastman like you can control it? Enough talking. Suddenly, Liana stepped forward. Her voice was cold and sharp. If you want the fourth true ancestor, you'll have to get past me first. She still felt a trace of fear facing a snowdrift wolf capable of suppressing vampires. But a mere beastman couldn't actually kill a vampire. Liana's emerald eyes gleamed. With a wave of her hand, two giant wolves, one red and one blue, materialized before her. Roar! The twin wolves lunged toward the Black Death Emperor's brother without hesitation. Roar! A deep roar responded, shaking the entire mausoleum. Behind him, the beastman army let out an earth-shaking roar. The air trembled. A violent gale blew through the space, tossing Koju and the others' hair into disarray. Koju clutched his ears, a piercing buzz ringing in his head. Too terrifying. His face was pale. Why? Why was this happening on what was supposed to be a relaxing summer vacation? What a misfortune. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Meanwhile, the twin wolves weren't fazed. The Emperor's brother didn't change expression. Then, his magic exploded. Boom! A terrifying aura shook the air. Rib! His body swelled violently, and his green uniform shredded instantly. Roar! A monstrous beast's body suddenly filled the underground mausoleum. Boom! His massive claws swiped down hard. The two summoned wolves were smacked into the frozen floor with a deafening crash. Liana's eyes widened. Skull! Heitai! She stared at the two groaning wolves sprawled on the ice, her pupils trembling in disbelief. This guy! How could he be this strong? Seeing this, Gajo cast a glance at Koju and Nagisa, his eyes turning grim. This wasn't good. Too many unpredictable variables. It was one thing if it were just the Lion King organization, but the Black Death Emperor's faction wasn't exactly known for being rational. Unlike Yukari, they couldn't be reasoned with. Now he regretted bringing Koju and Nagisa here. The operation had been kept strictly confidential. So why? Why had the Lion King organization and a terrorist group like the Black Death Emperor's faction shown up? There's a rat among us. That was Gajo's first thought. But now wasn't the time to dwell on that. He walked up beside Liana, face serious. He whispered, things are getting out of hand. If it were just him, with his own unique abilities, he'd be fine. But the problem was Kojo and Nagisa. Liana snapped back to attention. She glanced at Kojo beside her, surprise flashing in her eyes. For all the time she had known this clown, this was the first time she had seen such a serious expression on him. Because she glanced at Kojo and Nagisa from the corner of her eye. Steeling herself, she nodded solemnly. Don't worry. I'll protect them. They were dragged into this because of her. Naturally, she would take responsibility. Even if it meant sacrificing her own life. She wouldn't let any harm come to them. Woo! She exhaled, her gaze full of determination. Meanwhile, Yukina drew the Snowdrift Wolf Schneewalzer from her backpack again, gripping it tightly. From that brief clash earlier, she could tell. The strength of that beastman was likely beyond her. It was even possible that he was at the same level as Dimitri Vatler. And if that were the case, the result would be the same as last time. She wouldn't be able to win. Back then, all she did was hold him off. The one who actually killed Vatler was Lynn. But still, whether as a shrine maiden of the Lion King organization or a follower of Lynn, there was no way she would retreat. Yukina's eyes turned resolute. She raised Schneewalzer and aimed it directly at the beastman. The Black Death Emperor's brother narrowed his massive beast-like eyes at the petite figure of Himuragi Yukina. His blood-soaked mouth curved into a terrifying arc. You dare to raise a weapon at me? Ha ha ha. You've got guts. His excitement surged. His pupils flickered wildly as if he had discovered something amusing. But soon after, those vertical pupils suddenly dimmed. Since you're that brave, then you'll die first. Buzz. Two dark red beams of light erupted from his eyes. Himuragi Yukina's pupils contracted. Just as she was about to act, she suddenly heard Yukari's voice. Lock. Crash. In the void, the sound of golden swords clashing echoed. The next moment, a barrier rose. Chains extended from the void, wrapping tightly around the barrier. Boom. The red beams struck the barrier, but instead of piercing through, they rebounded off it like hitting solid glass. The energy deflected onto the thick layer of ice nearby. Boom. The entire underground mausoleum trembled violently. The Black Death Emperor's brother widened one eye as he stared at the blonde woman inside the barrier. So she could block his attack. It seemed the Lion King organization wasn't to be underestimated. His eyes narrowed. However, what interested him more than Yukari's abilities was something else entirely. His gaze drifted to where the beams had struck. The thick layer of ice remained untouched, as though the beams hadn't damaged it at all. But he knew the strength of his own magic. Which could only mean the ice was far more durable than his power. The fourth true ancestor? His line of sight passed through the group and landed on the girl in the ice coffin. It was hard to believe such overwhelming power was sealed inside such a frail-looking body. I, sword shaman of the high god and priestess of the lion, beseech thee. Dawn light of exorcism, spirit wolf of snowy mist, grant me the divine might of thy steel, that I may smite 100 evil spirits. Just as his attention was fixed on the fourth true ancestor, Yukina seized the opportunity and released the snowdrift wolf. Slash! A flash of silver light cut through the frigid air. Wrapped in a fierce cyclone, it shot toward the Black Death Emperor's brother. Sensing the danger, his beastly eyes snapped toward the spiraling spear. A strange prickling hit his temple. What was this? His instincts screamed that this attack wouldn't kill him, but it definitely wouldn't feel good. With a roar, he opened his mouth wide and released a stream of dark flames. Buzz! The flames formed a solid wall of darkness, blocking the snowdrift wolf's charge. The raging fire cancelled out the spear's magic power, scattering it. This. Kojo stared in disbelief at the spectacle. Then he looked at Himuragi Yukina, and then at his clueless son. Smack! He clicked his tongue. They're all high school students. Why? He shook his head and continued watching the standoff between Yukina and the Black Death Emperor's brother. Meanwhile, seeing Yukina and Yukari engage, Liana let out a sigh of relief. It seemed they still honored the agreement, even if it was only verbal cooperation. At this point, she was genuinely glad someone from the Lion King organization had shown up. Because if she had to face the Black Death Emperor's brother alone, she wouldn't even know where to begin. Still, Liana didn't fully relax. Even though Yukina's strength exceeded her expectations, from the looks of things, it hadn't made a dent in the enemy. Elsewhere, inside the barrier, Yukina remained calm. The snowdrift wolf's attack had failed to land, but she wasn't surprised. She raised her hand. The snowdrift wolf immediately stopped and returned to her hand. She sighed. I still can't unleash the snowdrift wolf's full power. If only she had the power Lynn used to return the world to its origin. Then maybe she could have resolved this situation. But she still wasn't strong enough. Yukari glanced at her and said casually, "Don't worry. Once your level increases, you'll be able to wield it." Just then, Liana and Gajo walked over. "Is there any solution?" Liana sounded a bit anxious. Yukari shrugged and replied nonchalantly, "I can hold him back, sure. But if you want to drive him away, you'll have to figure that out yourselves." Liana. With the fourth true ancestor right in front of them, who would be willing to just walk away? She clenched her teeth. Damn it! Nearby, Gajo narrowed his eyes at Yukari, who was far too relaxed for the situation. You've got a plan, don't you?" Yukari glanced at him and smiled lazily. Sharp eyes. Liana looked puzzled, then her expression shifted. She quickly grabbed Yukari's arm. "You have a plan?" Yukari gave her a mysterious smile and replied with a single word. "Wait." Liana tilted her head, completely confused. "Wait. Yukari nodded, saying nothing more. Gajo rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Wait. He hadn't seen any big spells being prepared. So what were they waiting for? He was confused for a moment. Still, Yukari wouldn't lie. Of course, that didn't mean he could just sit back and watch. He turned back toward the Black Death Emperor's brother, countless thoughts flashing through his mind, searching for a breakthrough. Elsewhere, the Black Death Emperor's brother closed his mouth. Dense black flames drifted from his lips like fog. His fierce eyes stared at the Snowdrift Wolf in Yukina's hand, flashing with intrigue. "That's quite a weapon you've got. But it'll be part of my collection soon. Ha ha ha." He burst into greedy laughter. Snowdrift Wolf. Yukina suddenly felt the Snowdrift Wolf tremble violently in her grip. Then, it flew from her hand and burst into radiant light. In the blink of an eye. Whoosh! The Snowdrift Wolf streaked straight toward the Black Death Emperor's brother. Yukari. She paused, confused. "Are you attacking again?" Yukina shook her head, her expression complicated. "No." Then, Yukari pointed at the Snowdrift Wolf, even more puzzled. "What's going on? It's moving on its own." Yukari was stunned. Yukina stared in the direction the Snowdrift Wolf flew, her expression mixed. "It seems like, the Snowdrift Wolf is angry." The Snowdrift Wolf Schneewalzer charged forward, cloaked in dazzling white light. There was even a faint trace of color glowing from within. Seeing this, both Himuragi Yukina and Yukari were momentarily surprised. However, Yukina frowned slightly. Her magic was draining too fast. The magic in her body couldn't keep up with the Snowdrift Wolf's output. She felt a little embarrassed. As its wielder, she couldn't even stand still and let it attack properly. The Snowdrift Wolf itself seemed to notice the issue. Once the colored glow reached a certain level, the light dimmed. It didn't continue charging. That was the limit of the magic Yukina could channel. Snowdrift Wolf Schneewalzer. A flash of surprise crossed Yukari's eyes. Did she just see a sigh of disappointment from a spear? What was that? She knew the Snowdrift Wolf had shown signs of sentience for a while now, but its emotions were clearly becoming more expressive. If it one day turned into a human, Yukari probably wouldn't be surprised at all. On the other side, the Black Death Emperor's brother looked at the Snowdrift Wolf charging toward him again and sneered. The weapon is good. But the wielder, not so much. From their earlier exchange, he had already roughly grasped what Himuragi Yukina was capable of. No need to be cautious. His massive arms ignited in black flames. He raised them and went to grab the incoming Snowdrift Wolf. Like a giant net engulfing the sky, his hands descended, thick with distorted heat waves from the intense flames. Just as his hands were about to enclose the Snowdrift Wolf, its light suddenly blazed brighter. Buzz! Amid the intense white glow, a streak of color stood out sharply. Slash! The beam of light touched his arms, followed by a sharp crackling sound. The black flames wrapped around his arms were immediately erased, like pencil marks wiped clean by an eraser. Seeing this, the Black Death Emperor's brother's pupils shrank. His heart skipped. A chilling sense of danger surged through him. A second later, agonizing pain erupted from his right arm. Erg! He groaned under his breath, eyes snapping down to his arm. What was once a massive limb was now gone. Blood gushed violently and splashed to the ground. His expression twisted in pain. He quickly pulled back and covered the severed stump with his left hand, pouring in magic to stop the bleeding. When the blood flow ceased, he let out a breath, then looked up with gritted teeth. What just happened? His gaze locked onto the Snowdrift Wolf, now dim and lying motionless on the ground. His eyes grew uncertain. Was that the spear's power? Then, where was his arm? He frantically scanned the area. If he could retrieve it, maybe it could still be reattached. But no matter how hard he looked, there was no trace of it. His frustration built. The sudden turn of events left Liana and Gajo stunned. It worked. Seeing the Black Death Emperor's brother's current state, they were finally certain. A sliver of hope stirred. Could this be a turning point? But their eyes shifted to the gasping Yukina, and that fragile hope dimmed again. That look, she was completely drained. Damn it! Even if the attack landed, if all her magic was exhausted just to take one arm. Liana's heart sank again. Her eyes drifted toward the snowdrift wolf lodged in the ground. If Yukina didn't have enough magic, could she? Don't even think about it. Yukari, having seen right through her thoughts, spoke calmly. If the snowdrift wolf doesn't recognize you, you don't even qualify to wield it. Liana paused, frowning slightly. Yukari gazed quietly at the snowdrift wolf, sighing internally. Returning the world to its origin. What a broken ability. Even with the magic reserves of a mid-level devil like Yukina, it had reached this level. What if her magic kept growing? She couldn't help but click her tongue. But she looked at the pale, heavily panting Yukina and asked in surprise. Yukina, were you able to tap into the snowdrift wolf's true power? Yukina, hands on her knees, shook her head. No. Yukari raised an eyebrow, focusing on her closely. Yukina took a deep breath and continued. It was the snowdrift wolf that triggered it on its own. She wasn't strong enough to release its full potential. And after this, even if she could use it again, she probably wouldn't dare to easily. She was completely drained, her body feeling hollowed out. After hearing her explanation, Yukari fell silent. So, the snowdrift wolf can act on its own. Still, it seemed the snowdrift wolf was also in a pretty bad mood. Yukari's expression turned odd. Opposite them, the Black Death Emperor's brother, still unable to find his arm, was growing visibly darker in mood. His beast-like gaze swept past the snowdrift wolf and locked onto Yukina and the others. He had thought they were nobodies. Yet now, they had left him this humiliated. Die. He parted his bloody jaws and spat out the word coldly. A moment later, pitch-black flames surged. He opened his mouth wide, condensing a sphere of searing black fire. Then with a roar, he fired a scorching black beam. Seeing it, Liana and the others' pupils shrank. Even in the freezing depths of the underground mausoleum, they could feel the beam's unbearable heat. We're going to die. Those words flashed through Liana's mind. Yukari narrowed her eyes and swiftly deployed several barriers to intercept the oncoming beam. But crack! Crack! Sharp breaking sounds rang out from the flames. The layers of barriers shattered in rapid succession. Yukari's expression froze. She hadn't expected such an overwhelming surge of power. Still, she wasn't panicked. Because, buzz! Just as the black flames were about to engulf them, a pitch-black magic circle appeared on the icy floor. In the next moment, a tall figure emerged from the magic circle. It was Lynn, having responded to the message Yukina sent through the group. He glanced at the incoming black beam, raised an eyebrow, then turned toward Yukari. So, is this the welcome party you arranged for me? Yukari laughed dryly and scratched her head. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond, so she forced a smile. Thankfully, Lynn didn't press the matter. His eyes calmly scanned the black flame beam. Then he raised his hand and opened his lips slightly. Emerald Core. To be continued.